That man is quite a renowned mid-true immortal stage elder of our sect. His name is Shu Tian, and illusions are his forte. He's not a bad person, but he's very mischievous and often uses his illusions to play pranks on others. Rest assured, he has no ill intentions, Qi Liang explained to Han Li through voice transmission. It was indeed true that the illusion just now hadn't tried to harm him in any way, so Han Li decided not to pursue the matter, merely withdrawing his gaze and paying no further heed to Shu Tiansheng. Shu Tiansheng was quite relieved to see this, but he was still occasionally darting curious glances at Han Li. An hour passed by, and during this time, 2 more true immortals arrived. Another 15 minutes passed without any further new arrivals, and the white-robed elderly man opened his eyes as he said in a cold voice, "It's about time we began, is it not, fellow Taoist Chang? I still have matters to attend to after this." A hesitant look appeared on Taoist Chang's face upon hearing this. There was still some time left until the scheduled start, but it didn't appear as if anyone else was going to show up. "All right, let's begin. There are 19 fellow Taoists attending this exchange event. On behalf of our Heavenly Scorpion sect, I would like to thank you for your patronage." Taoist Changhe rose to his feet and cupped his fist in a salute to everyone present as he spoke. "Let's skip all the formalities and begin, fellow Taoist Chang," a square-faced blaze dragon Tao elder said. Despite being repeatedly rebuked, Taoist Chang wasn't irked in the slightest as he declared, "It seems like everyone's in quite a hurry. The rules of this exchange event are the same as before. Everyone takes turns displaying the treasures that they prepared, then provide a short description of the treasure, as well as what you're looking for in exchange. If both sides agree to the deal, then it'll be finalized. On top of that, our Heavenly Scorpion sect is only providing this venue, and we're doing so free of charge, so if any disputes arise after an exchange is made, we accept no responsibility. With that, let's begin." As soon as his voice trailed off, a bald man seated next to him immediately rose to his feet. The man patted the storage pouch strapped to his waist, and a blue jade box appeared in his hand. The jade box was surrounded by a small cloud of blue mist, and it was giving off a bone-chilling aura. It was clear that the box held something quite remarkable, and everyone's attention was immediately drawn to it. A pleased look appeared on the bald man's face at the sight of everyone's reactions, and he opened the box in a slow and deliberate fashion to reveal a fist-sized blue crystal with liquid-like blue light flowing around it. The crystal was giving off a glacial aura coupled with faint law power fluctuations, and as soon as it was revealed, the air temperature in the hall plummeted, causing all of the moisture in the air to freeze into ice crystals, presenting a beautiful spectacle to behold. This is a piece of blue-veined glacial crystal. It's near indestructible and contains extremely formidable glacial qi, making it an ideal material for refining frost-attribute immortal treasures, the bold man declared with a proud expression. Many of the people present were clearly interested in the crystal, but Han Li only took a glance at it before withdrawing his gaze. To the average true immortal, materials that contained law powers were very precious, but he possessed many such items, so this one wasn't of particular interest to him. "That's a very precious material, fellow Taoist Zin. Have you considered what you would like in exchange for it?" Taoist Chang asked. "I would like a metal attribute spirit material or demon beast core of the same caliber," the bald man replied. Everyone remained silent, and the people that were interested in the crystal could only shake their heads with wry smiles. The blue-veined glacial crystal was indeed a precious material, but what he was asking for was just as precious and rare. The bald man's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. "I don't have either of the two things that you stated, but I'm willing to purchase that crystal from you using immortal origin stones," an elderly man wearing a round hat declared. I'm not short on immortal origin stones at the moment. If no one can offer me what I asked for, then I'll be keeping this crystal for now," the bald man replied as he closed the jade box and sat back down. The elderly man wearing the round hat could only heave a forlorn sigh in response. After the bald man sat down, the young woman seated next to him rose to her feet, then swept a hand through the air to release 4 or 5 azure bones, all of which were giving off a faint azure glow. "These are some true immortal demon beast bones, and in exchange, I would like some pills to assist me in my cultivation." Demon beast materials generally weren't that precious, so the bones on display didn't attract much interest. However, these were still the remains of true immortal stage demon beasts, so they were ultimately taken by a blaze dragon Dao in exchange for 2 vials of pills. After the young woman came Shu Tian. "Fellow Taoists, I've brought with me a set of 49 lost soul flags, every single one of which is a spirit treasure in their own right, while the 3 primary flags are top-grade spirit treasures. When unleashed all at once, the 49 lost soul flags are just as powerful as the average immortal treasure. In exchange for them, I would like 1 piece each of profound devilish metal essence and heavenly softwater crystal," Shu Tiansheng declared as he swept a sleeve through the air, and 49 palm-sized black flags appeared in front of him one after another, with 3 of them clearly larger than the rest. Shu Tiansheng made a hand seal, and a dark cloud that was as black as ink erupted out of the flags to instantly fill the entire hall. A burst of horrific howling also rang out from within the black cloud, causing the surrounding space to shudder. Everyone was quite amazed to see this, and Han Li took an extra glance at the flags as well. Up to this point, these flags were the most precious item that had been presented, but he still wasn't interested. However, many of the other cultivators present were very keen to get their hands on this set of flags, and after a fierce round of bidding, they were ultimately exchanged for a piece of profound devilish metal essence and 2,000 top-grade spirit stones, as well as several other treasures. The items presented by the next few people after Shu Tiansheng were also quite remarkable, and the atmosphere in the exchange event was gradually beginning to heat up. Up to this point, the most precious items presented had been 3 purple flowers called Purple Devil's Trumpets, and each one contained enough poison to kill a true immortal. At the same time, they were an extremely precious type of spirit material for refining poison attribute immortal treasures. In exchange, the owner of the flowers was asking for the core of a true immortal stage demon beast known as the Crimson Crown Fire Crane, but no one had such a demon core in their possession. As time passed, the atmosphere in the exchange event gradually peaked to a climax. Qi Liang had his turn right before Han Li, and he was quite fortunate, exchanging a pair of spirit treasures for a 100,000-year-old spirit plant. Finally, it was Han Li's turn, and he swept a sleeve over the table to produce 2 items, namely a black ball and a crimson crystal the size of a human head. The black ball was the demon core of Zhang Luan's black crane steed, while the crimson crystal was the material that contained fire law powers that he had obtained from the thin elderly man. Through some investigation, Han Li had discovered that this was a type of material known as blush cloud fire crystal, and while it did contain fire attribute law powers, its natural limitations meant that it couldn't hold a large amount of fire attribute spiritual power, thereby making it unfit for use as a tool refinement material. However, it had an alternative use, which was to tame fire attribute spiritual power. Fire attribute spiritual power was generally extremely violent, yet any fire attribute spiritual power that was passed through a piece of blush cloud fire crystal would instantly become extremely mellow and mild. It was exactly because of this that this crystal was one of the best materials for refining pill cauldrons or tool refinement cauldrons. Even if only a small amount of this crystal were added to a cauldron, its stability would be significantly enhanced. This chunk of blush cloud fire crystal was definitely large enough to refine an exceptional cauldron. So it would have definitely been able to fetch an astronomical price in a sect that was proficient in pill or tool refinement. Compared with the blush cloud fire crystal, the black demon core was also very precious, but far less so. Taoist Chang initially faltered slightly at the sight of the blush cloud fire crystal, following which an intense look appeared in his eyes as he stared at the crystal with an unblinking gaze, and he was so excited that his cheeks had become slightly flushed. Most of the people present weren't able to identify this crystal, but they could tell from Taoist Chang's expression that it was an extremely precious item, and they began asking one another about it through voice transmission. I have here a true immortal stage demon beast core and a piece of blush cloud fire crystal. I'm looking to exchange the demon beast core for a myriad axis fruit and a blood crystal lotus root, both of which must be over 50,000 years of age, and I'll accept any one of a list of 9 materials for the blush cloud fire crystal, Han Li declared, then rattled off the list of 9 materials that he was searching for. The excitement in everyone's eyes gradually faded upon hearing what Han Li had to say, and a long period of silence ensued. Right at this moment, the white-robed elderly man broke the silence, and he was looking at the black demon beast core as he said, "I have a myriad axis fruit, but no blood crystal lotus root. Would you accept something else as a substitute?" "Let me take a look at your myriad axis fruit first," Han Li said. The white-robed elderly man pulled out an azure wooden box, but instead of immediately tossing it to Han Li, he asked, "Would I be able to take a closer look at that demon core as well, fellow Taoist?" "Of course," Han Li replied with a smile, then swept a hand through the air to release a burst of azure light that carried the demon core to the elderly man. In return, the white-robed elderly man tossed his wooden box to Han Li as well. There was a talisman adhered to the wooden box, and with a sweep of Han Li's hand, the talisman was removed amid a flash of azure light, while the lid flew off on its own. A golden fist-sized spirit fruit was laying inside the box, and there was a series of ring-shaped patterns on its surface. The fruit wasn't releasing any special aroma, but it was giving off an immense aura of vitality. Han Li gently picked up the fruit for a closer inspection, then nodded with a pleased expression. This was indeed a myriad axis fruit, and it was at least 60,000 to 70,000 years old, so it was old enough for his pill refinement needs. Furthermore, the core of the fruit was also completely undamaged, so he would be able to plant it. After inspecting the black demon core for a while, the white-robed elderly man was clearly also quite pleased with what he saw, and he swept a sleeve through the air to release 4 or 5 more jade boxes of different colors. "Like I said, I don't have a blood crystal lotus root, but these items should be comparable in value." The elderly man swept his sleeve through the air once again as he spoke, and all of the lids of the boxes were removed to reveal their contents. Han Li took a glance at the items in the boxes, then said, "These are indeed all comparable in value to the blood crystal lotus root, but I'm afraid none of them fit my needs, so I'll take some immortal origin stones instead." After their exchange was complete, Taoist Chang said, "Fellow Taoist Li, the 9 materials that you're looking for are extremely rare, and it seems like no one has what you're looking for. May I ask if you're willing to exchange that blush cloud fire crystal for spirit stones as well?" As Taoist Chang was speaking, Han Li noticed another pair of eyes being trained on him, and it was none other than Shu Tian. With Han Li looking his way, Shu Tian immediately put on a fawning smile. Han Li withdrew his gaze, then shook his head with a decisive expression. "My apologies, but I'm only going to exchange this blush cloud fire crystal for one of the 9 aforementioned materials." Taoist Chang was quite disappointed to hear this, but he was still unwilling to give up. Is there no room for negotiation at all, fellow Taoist Li? After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li said, I won't exchange this piece of blush cloud fire crystal for anything else, but I do have some smaller pieces of the same material that I'm willing to exchange for any leads on where I can obtain one or more of the 9 materials I mentioned earlier. He swept a sleeve over the table once again as he spoke, and a pair of fist-sized blush cloud fire crystals appeared. Taoist Cheng took a longing glance at the 2 pieces of blush cloud fire crystal, but ultimately sat back down with a defeated expression. Shu Tian also sat down in his chair with a sullen expression, while Han Li heaved an internal sigh before stowing the 3 blush cloud fire crystals on the table away again. The exchange event continued, but in contrast with the blush cloud fire crystals, everything else that was presented was made to look completely mediocre, and the atmosphere gradually died down. An hour later, the exchange event concluded, and Han Li immediately stood up to leave with Qi Liang. Once again, Taoist Cheng asked Han Li whether he was willing to exchange one of the 2 smaller blush cloud fire crystals for something else, and he brought out a formation of rare and exotic items for Han Li's consideration. However, none of those items caught Han Li's interest, and much to Taoist Cheng's disappointment, he was turned down once again. However, Han Li did leave a communication formation plate to Taoist Cheng so that he could contact Han Li if he ever did come across one of the 9 materials or news on any one of them. A glimmer of hope was sparked in Taoist Cheng's heart, and he promised that he would do his best, while also imploring Han Li to save 1 or 2 of the blush cloud fire crystals for him. Han Li was rather surprised by how urgent Taoist Cheng was in his pursuit for a blush cloud fire crystal, and he agreed to his request before departing with Qi Liang. Where are you going next, Brother Li? Qi Liang asked. I'm going to go to some other places to search for some materials. It's not every day that I get this opportunity, so I have to make the most of it, Han Li replied. Qi Liang nodded in response. I have some matters to take care of as well, so I won't accompany you any further, Brother Li. Take care. All right, then I'll see you at the preaching ceremony, Han Li said with a smile, then promptly departed. Qi Liang looked at Han Li's departing figure for a while, then heaved a faint sigh before departing in another direction. Han Li made his way down the street for a while before suddenly stopping in his tracks, then turned around with a cold expression. You've been following me for quite some time now. What business do you have with me? Standing not far away behind Han Li was none other than Shu Tian. I am Shu Tian of the Heavenly Sage Peak. Please accept my apologies for my rude actions during the exchange event, fellow Taoist Li, Shu Tian said in an earnest manner as he cupped his fist in an apologetic salute. Han Li's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and he said, Don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. My question is, why are you following me around? Thank you for your understanding, fellow Taoist Li. I came here to ask you if you were planning to continue searching for the materials that you mentioned during the exchange event just now, Shu Tian explained. I don't like to talk in circles, so if you have something to say, then be more straightforward, Han Li said. Truth be told, I have information on where you can secure one of those materials, but I didn't want to say it in front of everyone back there, Shu Tian replied as a serious look appeared on his face. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up slightly upon hearing this. Which material do you have information on? Shu Tian opened his mouth to reply, but then decided against it. Han Li could see that Shu Tian had some reservations, so he said, Rest assured, the offer that I made earlier still stands. If you can provide me with information on one of the materials, then you can have one of my blush cloud fire crystals. Well, I do have information one of the materials, but instead of one of the 9, it's the blood crystal lotus root, Shu Tian said. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, then nodded in response. That's fine. That's also one of the things that I'm looking for. What would you like in exchange for this information? I can see that you're a very straightforward man, so I'll cut straight to the chase. I want to exchange the information I have for a blush cloud fire crystal, Shu Tian said with a smile. Han Li offered no response to this. Shu Tian took a deep breath, then continued. I know that the blood crystal lotus root is lesser in value than the other 9 materials that you mentioned, so I'm willing to throw in some immortal origin stones as well in exchange for a small piece of blush cloud fire crystal. There's no need for that. The blood crystal lotus root is one of the things that I'm looking for as well, so I won't ask for any extra immortal origin stones, Han Li said with a shake of his head. His expression remained unchanged, but he was actually quite excited. Compared with the 9 ingredients required for Dao pill refinement, he would actually rather acquire the blood crystal lotus root, as that was the final ingredient he was missing for refining myriad axis pills. Thank you for your generosity, fellow Taoist Li. At the moment, there are many cultivators gathered in White Jade City, and there's no lack of true immortals among them, so there are many more auctions and exchange events to come. There's a secret high-end auction that's going to take place in 3 days, and only those who are at or above the mid-true immortal stage can attend. I only learned about this auction by chance, and I've heard that the blood crystal lotus root will be one of the auction items, Shu Tian informed through voice transmission. An intrigued look appeared in Han Li's eyes upon hearing this. The fact that only those at or above the mid-true immortal stage could attend the auction meant that most of the Blaze Dragon Dao's elders would not have been granted entry, so this was quite a prestigious event. Seeing as you were able to dispel my illusion so easily, I'm sure the cultivation base restriction won't be a problem for you, Shu Tian said, having adopted his usual cheeky grin again. Han Li paid no heed to this blatant attempt at probing out his cultivation base as he nodded in response. All right, I'll be sure to attend this auction, and I'll give you a blush cloud fire crystal if a blood crystal lotus root really does appear. A hint of elation flashed through Shu Tiansheng's eyes upon hearing this, and he nodded as he said, Great, I'll meet you back here at noon in 3 days. After that, he promptly bade farewell to Han Li, and the two went their separate ways. The day quickly flew by, and at night, a series of massive crescent-shaped gemstones appeared throughout White Jade City, releasing bright white radiance that made the city just as bright as it was during the day. All of the buildings in the city also lit up, and with the night sky acting as a backdrop, the entire city appeared even more alluring and resplendent than it was in the day. Right at this moment, Han Li emerged from one of the shops in the city. He had visited all of the remaining materials shops in the city out of hope more than conviction, and sure enough, he hadn't found any of the materials that he was looking for. He was already prepared for this outcome, but he still couldn't help but feel a little disappointment, and he had no choice but to place his hopes in the private auctions and exchange events. However, his exploration of the city hadn't been entirely fruitless. For example, he had learned from the owner of one of the shops that another exchange event was going to take place the next day. This exchange event was likely going to be even smaller than the one held in the Heavenly Scorpion Pavilion, but Han Li wasn't going to miss it. A short while later, Han Li arrived on a rather quiet street that was lined with inns. Having explored the city for an entire day, he may not have exactly been tired, but it was still time to get some rest. After looking around for a while, he chose one of the smaller inns and requested a peaceful room, upon which he was led by an inn employee to a room on the 3rd floor. Have a good night, and if you need anything, just call for me, the employee said. Han Li took a glance around the room to find that it was to his liking, and he gave the employee a spirit stone as a tip before waving a dismissive hand, indicating for him to leave. The employee was ecstatic and extended a grateful bow before quickly departing. Han Li was just about to close the door when the sound of footsteps rang out nearby, and a woman in red passed by in front of his room. The woman's face was obscured by a veil, but she seemed to have been quite young and possessed an exceptional figure. White Jade City was quite a large city, but due to the excessive number of cultivators in the city, most of the inns were most likely quite full. The woman in red took a glance at Han Li, then quickly made her way past him and disappeared down the corridor. A hint of befuddlement emerged in Han Li's eyes as he looked on at her departing figure. The woman had concealed her own aura, but with Han Li's immense spiritual sense, he was able to instantly detect that she was a true immortal cultivator. At the moment, true immortals were a dime a dozen in White Jade City, but this woman struck Han Li with a sense of familiarity, as if he had seen her before somewhere. However, he couldn't recall exactly where he had seen her before, so he could only set the train of thought aside. After closing the door, Han Li set up a layer of restrictions in the room, then sat down with his legs crossed on the bed. 3 days passed by in a flash, and Han Li arrived at the rendezvous location at noon. Shu Tian was already waiting there, and he immediately greeted Han Li with a wide smile. "Welcome, fellow Taoist Li." Han Li merely nodded in response. "The auction venue is quite obscure, so please come with me, fellow Taoist Li." Shu Tian communicated through voice transmission, then led the way ahead. The two of them walked along the streets in silence, and only after walking for close to an hour did they arrive at a secluded little shop. The shop didn't have any customers, and there was only an elderly shopkeeper resting on a reclining chair behind the counter, looking as if he were about to nod off at any moment. Shu Tian flashed Han Li a smile, then tapped the counter a few times as he yelled, "Rise and shine, shopkeeper Gu." The elderly man behind the counter opened his eyes and took a lazy glance at Shu Tian and Han Li, then slowly sat up as he yawned and asked in a raspy voice, "What would you like to buy?" "The best that your shop has to offer, of course." Shu Tian was sliding his finger over the counter, and Han Li noticed that he was tracing out a strange pattern with his finger. An alert look immediately appeared in the elderly man's eyes upon seeing this, and he nodded in response before rising to his feet and making his way deeper into the shop, followed closely by Han Li's duo. Before long, the three of them arrived in a dilapidated wooden shack in the backyard of the shop. The elderly man tapped one of the walls of the shack a couple of times, and a string of cracks rang out as a layer of azure light appeared over the wall, then transformed into a shimmering azure door, beyond which was a dark pathway that appeared to have been leading underground. "The auction venue is down there," the elderly man said as he pulled out a pair of white masks for Han Li's duo. Some star and moon designs were engraved onto the masks, and they were giving off rippling waves of blue and white light, giving the masks quite a profound appearance. Shu Tian accepted the masks, then handed one to Han Li before leading the way into the passageway. Han Li took a glance at the mask in his hand, then gave the elderly shopkeeper a nod before stepping into the passageway as well. The stone gated behind him swung shut amid a burst of dull rumbling, and the interior of the passageway was plunged into complete darkness. However, this degree of darkness, naturally, wasn't going to trouble Han Li. The blue and light on Shu Tian's mask swelled to form a light barrier that enveloped his entire body. Han Li was rather intrigued to see this. The blue and white light barrier was able to keep out even his spiritual sense, and it also concealed the majority of Shu Tian's aura. If it weren't for the fact that the two of them had been standing together this entire time, Han Li would have been unsure of whether this person actually was Shu Tian. The aura concealment effect of these masks was very similar to that of the masks of the Transient Guild, but they were far lacking compared to the Transient Guild masks when it came to their ability to alter auras. Hanli also put on his mask before injecting some immortal spiritual power into it, but to his surprise, it displayed no reaction at all. Hanli faltered slightly upon seeing this, then increased his immortal spiritual power output. However, the mask was like a bottomless pit, and its surface had lit up slightly, but it was nowhere to the same extent as Shu Tiansheng's mask. Hanli continued to increase his immortal spiritual power output until he was drawing upon most of the immortal spiritual power in his body, and only then did he manage to achieve the same effect as Shu Tiansheng's mask. Only then did Hanli realize that this mask was a device that verified one's cultivation base, and that those below the mid-true immortal stage would have been unable to use it. The two of them made their way down the dark passageway for a while before turning a corner and arriving in a stone chamber, at the end of which was a white door of light that was giving off a gentle glow in the darkness. The auction venue is just inside. Shu Tiansheng seemed to have been quite familiar with this place, and he strode through the door of light. The blue and white light barrier around him resonated momentarily with the door of light, and he abruptly vanished. Hanli also stepped through the door of light, following which he found himself situated in a hall with Shu Tiansheng standing not far away. Hanli cast his gaze into the hall to find that it was ovular in shape, and around 3,000 to 4,000 feet in size. The furnishings in the hall were quite luxurious, and the ground was paved with beautiful dark red bricks, while several massive and intricately crafted palace lanterns were hanging from the ceiling. There were also many gemstones embedded into the walls, but even with the palace lanterns and gemstones acting as light sources, the area was still rather dim. There were several dozen large chairs crafted from precious wooden materials in the hall, and many of them were already occupied. But all of the people seated on the chairs were also enshrouded in blue and white light barriers, making it impossible to glean their true appearance. In front of these chairs was a short stone platform, upon which was placed a rectangular table, and behind the table were 3 empty chairs. The arrival of Han Li's duo didn't draw much attention, attracting only a few fleeting glances. "Looks like the auction isn't starting quiet yet. Let's find some seats first," Shu Tiansheng said in a low voice. Han Li nodded in response, and he and Shu Tiansheng sat down on a pair of neighboring chairs near the back of the hall. From there, Han Li looked around the hall, and a peculiar look flashed through his eyes. There was a faint yellow light barrier over all of the walls of the hall, and it didn't appear to have been all that remarkable, but Han Li could sense that the restriction was extremely thick and dense. The restriction was clearly an Earth attribute one, and it seemed to have been drawing power from the vast Earth, which meant that attacking the restriction would have been equivalent to attacking the entire Earth itself. Such an advanced restriction was extremely uncommon, and by Han Li's estimates, even if he were to go all out, he most likely wouldn't have been able to break the restriction. The fact that there was such a formidable restriction in the auction venue indicated that this was truly a very prestigious event. Everyone in the hall was seated with their eyes closed, and the entire hall was completely silent and filled with a tense and heavy atmosphere. 2 hours passed by in a flash, and during this time, 2 more cultivators arrived in the hall, both of which also sat down in silence. Right at this moment, a wooden door swung open on the side of the hall, and 3 figures, 2 tall and 1 short, emerged from within. These 3 figures were also completely enshrouded in blue and white light barriers that concealed their appearance, and they made their way over to the long table on the stone platform before sitting down behind it, with the shorter figure situated at the center. "Sorry to keep you all waiting, fellow Taoists. Before we begin the auction, allow me to lay out what's going to happen today," the short figure declared. His voice was extremely clear and penetrative, and everyone below the platform immediately sat up straighter to listen. This auction will be split up into two parts. During the first half, the three of us will conduct the auction as normal, and after the auction, all of you will be welcome to come up to the stage to display any valuable items that you're looking to sell or exchange, and you can negotiate your own terms without any intervention from the three of us. All right, without further ado, let's begin. As soon as his voice trailed off, the tall figure to his left swept a hand through the air to produce a rectangular wooden box with several talismans adhered to it. The short figure accepted the wooden box, then removed the talismans before opening it. Inside the box was an antiquated-looking blue longsword that was giving off dazzling blue light that was flowing over the blade of the sword like water while producing a faint splashing sound. Tiny blue runes could be seen drifting throughout the blue light, and the entire sword was giving off law power fluctuations. "That's an immortal treasure," someone exclaimed before the short figure even had a chance to say anything. Han Li's eyes lit up slightly upon seeing this. The fact that the first auction item was an immortal treasure of a decent caliber certainly boded well for things to come. "Indeed, fellow Taoist, our first auction item is this sea-splitting immortal slaying sword, and it's a bona fide immortal treasure that contains immense water law powers, far more so than the average immortal treasure." The short figure began to give a description of the sword, and he was an extremely eloquent speaker, sparing no praise in his description of the sword, and making it out to be an unmatched weapon that would grant the wielder invincibility. Many of the auction-goers were tempted by what they were hearing, and they were eager for the bidding to begin. The starting price for the sea-splitting immortal slaying sword will be 60 immortal origin stones, and each bid must go up by an increment of at least 2 immortal origin stones, the short figure declared. 60, 65, 70. As soon as the short figure's voice trailed off, a string of bids immediately began flooding in, quickly elevating the bidding price to 130 immortal origin stones. At this point, there were only a handful of people left participating in the bidding, and ultimately, the sword was purchased for 160 immortal origin stones. Han Li chose not to place any bids. While it was true that the sea-splitting immortal slaying sword contained immense law powers, he could sense that the law powers within it were a little chaotic, indicating that something had gone wrong during the refinement process, so this was above its deserved selling price. The atmosphere had already livened up quite a bit, and the short figure was clearly very pleased to see this as he declared, "Our second auction item is a 100,000-year-old soul-birth flower. I'm sure I don't need to tell you all how valuable such a spirit plant is. It's the ideal supplementary material for refining avatars." The tall figure next to him pulled out a jade box, then opened it to reveal a golden spirit flower. Many of the auction-goers erupted into chatter upon seeing this. The flower wasn't comparable in value to an immortal treasure, but it was certainly far rarer. After praising the soul-birth flower for a while, the short figure declared, "The starting price will be 30 immortal origin stones, and each bid must go up by an increment of at least 1 immortal origin stone." A hint of surprise flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he clearly wasn't expecting to see a soul-birth flower of such an advanced age here. He still had some soul-birth flower seeds, so he naturally had no intention of bidding for the flower, but it seemed that Shu Tian was very eager to obtain the flower, and he was participating in the bidding war. However, after a few rounds of bidding, the price was quickly raised to over 80 immortal origin stones, and Shu Tian could only drop out of the bidding war. In the end, the flower was sold for 95 immortal origin stones, much to Han Li's intrigue. He wasn't expecting soulbirth flowers to be able to fetch such a high price even on the ancient cloud continent. With the heaven-controlling vial in his possession, he could mature some soulbirth flowers at any time. But all spirit plants watered with the heaven-controlling vial's spirit liquid were imbued with traces of time law powers, which made selling such spirit plants quite risky and only something that he could turn to as a last resort. With that in mind, Han Li could only heave an internal sigh. The auction continued, and around 20 to 30 items were auctioned off in a flash. All of the auction items had been extremely precious, with not a single one of them selling for below 50 immortal origin stones, but the blood crystal lotus root still hadn't appeared. Han Li was starting to grow a little concerned, and Shu Tian was also getting slightly agitated. "Are you sure your sources are correct, fellow Taoist Shu?" Han Li asked through voice transmission. "I'm certain. I have some ties with the powers behind this auction, and there's no way they would lie to me," Shu Tiansheng hurriedly replied. Han Li offered no response to Shu Tiansheng, but his mind was racing. At this point in the auction, the value of the auction items was gradually beginning to increase, with the exception of a few items that bucked this trend. The blood crystal lotus root was quite a precious spirit plant, but it was already slightly lacking in value compared with the past few auction items, so it seemed increasingly unlikely that it was going to appear. The same thought seemed to have occurred to Shu Tiansheng as well, and he was becoming more and more agitated. After all, if the blood crystal lotus root didn't appear in the auction, then he wouldn't be able to obtain a blush cloud fire crystal from Han Li, and he would most likely lose some trust from Han Li as well. At this moment, an item had just been auctioned off, and a new item was brought out to replace it. The new item was a fist-sized fire attribute true immortal stage demon beast core that was giving off a fiery red glow, within which were circles of tiny crimson runes. This is the demon core of a golden scale red worm at the pinnacle of the late true immortal stage, meaning it was one step away from the golden immortal stage at the time that it was slain. Its core is imbued with tremendous fire attribute law powers, making this an object of immeasurable value for those using fire attribute cultivation arts. The starting price is 60 immortal origin stones, the short figure declared. Han Li nodded slightly to himself upon seeing this. According to the provided description, the demon beast that the core had been procured from had been at an extremely lofty cultivation base, and the law power fluctuations emanating from its core was far superior to that of the demon core of Zhang Luan's black crane steed. With that in mind, even Han Li was feeling a little tempted to participate in the bidding. However, such a precious demon core was undoubtedly going to be quite expensive. He had already saved up quite a large number of immortal origin stones, but after the past 200 years of cultivation and pill refinement, he only had just over 1,000 left, so he couldn't afford to make unnecessary purchases. 60. Shu Tiansheng had made the first bid. 80. A female voice rang out, this time from Han Li's other side. Han Li turned in that direction to find a petite figure seated on a chair to his left near the edge of the venue, and judging from her voice, she seemed to have been quite young. Han Li had some recollection of her, as she was the last person to arrive at the auction venue, and she was giving off a cold and unapproachable aura. 90. This bid had come from a tall cultivator seated to the right side of the venue. 100, Shu Tiansheng called out. 120. The female cultivator seemed to have been insistent on placing bids in increments of 20 immortal origin stones. Shu Tiansheng hesitated momentarily, then decided to drop out of the bidding war. This was already a very high price, and it wasn't worth making any further bids. 130. The tall cultivator raised the price once again. 140. The female cultivator was completely unfazed. Han Li shook his head slightly upon seeing this. 140 immortal origin stones was quite a large sum, even for a mid-true immortal cultivator, and it was already far too much to pay for a late-true immortal stage demon beast core. The tall cultivator was silent for a moment, then placed another bid. 145. 150. A hint of disdain had crept into the female cultivator's voice, and she seemed to have been losing her patience. This time, the tall cultivator finally fell silent and didn't place any further bids. Everyone present immediately turned to the female cultivator while shaking their heads, but she merely ignored them. The short figure on the auction platform was naturally extremely pleased, and he quickly announced the sale of the demon core. A true immortal stage demon beast core is quite a precious object, but the next auction item is even more valuable, so be sure not to pass up on it, the short auctioneer declared as he swept a hand through the air, and a large crimson jade box appeared on the stage. The entire box was giving off a layer of translucent crimson light, as well as a faint sweet fragrance that was wafting through the air in all directions. The short auctioneer made a hand seal, and the lid of the jade box flew off on its own amid a flash of light. Inside the box was a length of crimson lotus root that was around the same thickness as a human arm. It was preserved extremely well, and even the whiskers on the roots hadn't been damaged in the slightest. Furthermore, the lotus root was glittering and translucent, looking as if it had been carved out of blood jade. The lotus root was giving off a gentle crimson glow that formed a band of crimson light several inches above it, and the rich aroma of sweetness that it was giving off was quite reinvigorating even to all of the formidable mid-true immortal cultivators present. Shu Tian was both ecstatic and relieved to see this, as was Han Li. It seemed that he had made a misjudgment. The blood crystal lotus root was indeed very hard to find, but as long as it wasn't over 50,000 years of age, it would have been lacking in value compared with the previous few auction items. However, this one was definitely no less than 100,000 years of age. However, in the next instant, his brows suddenly furrowed slightly. He had noticed a subtle detail, which was that there was a gray area on the blood crystal lotus root that was around the size of a fingernail, and it seemed that the area had been contaminated. This is a blood crystal lotus root. Normally, a blood crystal lotus root wouldn't have made an appearance this late in the auction, but this one is already 150,000 years of age, making it an extremely rare specimen. I'm sure some of you have already noticed this gray spot on the lotus root. This is not a result of the lotus root being damaged. Instead, it's a rare kindred mark, the short auctioneer declared. Many of the auction goers erupted into chatter upon hearing this. Some of you may not be aware of what a kindred mark is. Essentially, if two spirit medicines are growing too close to one another, their spiritual power will impact each other, thereby resulting in the emergence of kindred marks, the short auctioneer continued. According to my knowledge, kindred marks can be both good or bad, and in bad cases, the energy in the spirit medicine will become very chaotic and weak, making it completely unusable, one of the auction goers declared. Even though his body was concealed within a blue and white light barrier, just like everyone else, it appeared that this was quite a portly individual. That is indeed true, fellow Taoist. Kindred marks can have different effects on spirit medicines, but we've already had this lotus root appraised by masters in spirit plant agriculture, and they've determined that this kindred mark has a positive influence. Not only is the energy in the blood crystal lotus root not chaotic in the slightest, it's abnormally pure and dense, so all of you can rest assured, the short auctioneer replied. This declaration was followed by another smattering of chatter. The starting price for this item will be 80 immortal origin stones, and each successive bid must go up by increments of at least 5 immortal origin stones, the short auctioneer declared. 85, 90, 100. The purported special characteristics of the blood crystal lotus root made it an even more desirable item to everyone. Not only was it an exceptional spirit plant for bodily nourishment, it was an extremely prized treasure for anyone using body refinement cultivation arts. And even before Han Li had placed a single bid, the price had already exceeded triple figures. Han Li merely sat still in his chair, seemingly contemplating something. He was determined to acquire this blood crystal lotus root, but instead of being in a hurry to make a bid for it now, he was going to enter the bidding war at the end. He turned to Shu Tian as he said, "Looks like your sources were correct after all. This is for you." He flipped a hand over to produce a fist-sized blush cloud fire crystal as he spoke, then offered it to Shu Tian. They were seated near the back of the venue, and there weren't many people around them, so they didn't have to hide what they were doing. The female cultivator who had purchased the fire attribute demon core just so happened to look over at them at this moment, and she immediately sat up noticeably straighter at the sight of the blush cloud fire crystal. Shu Tiansheng was ecstatic, and he hurriedly accepted the crystal. "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Han Li offered no response as he turned his attention back to the ongoing auction. After a few rounds of bidding, the price had climbed all the way to 150 Immortal origin stones, and that bid had been made by none other than the portly figure from before. In the wake of this bid, all of the other bidders fell silent. 160. Han Li had finally made his first bid. The portly man turned to take a glance at him, then harumphed coldly as he called out, 170. 190. Han Li's voice remained calm and level, and it seemed that had absolute confidence. The portly man hesitated momentarily, then placed another bid. 200. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he didn't want this to drag on any longer, so he decided to put his foot down once and for all. 250. Shu Tiansheng turned to Han Li with a stunned expression, as did many of the other auction-goers. A 150,000-year-old blood crystal lotus root was indeed extremely precious, but this was far too heavy a price to pay. Han Li paid no heed to everyone else, and even though he was looking directly at the blood crystal lotus root on the stage, he was also keeping tabs on the portly figure out of the corner of his eye. This time, the portly figure hesitated once again before deciding to concede. The short auctioneer was already very pleased with this price, and with no further bids coming in, he declared the blood crystal lotus root as having been sold to Han Li. Han Li heaved an internal sigh of relief as an excited look appeared in his eyes. He had finally gathered all of the materials required to refine the myriad axis pill, and all he needed was a piece of the blood crystal lotus root to grow more. As these thoughts were running through his mind, the next auction item was brought out. It was a piece of artwork that depicted a mountain, a river, and a palace. The scroll that contained the artwork was blue in color, and it was giving off a glacial aura. It was clearly a formidable treasure, and the glacial chi that it was giving off was also interspersed with law fluctuations, indicating that it was an immortal treasure. However, one corner of the scroll was slightly damaged, and that was the only imperfection. This is an immortal treasure by the name of the profound glacial scenic painting. It contains extremely formidable profound glacial chi and can unleash several types of glacial attacks. Unfortunately, it's a little damaged. The starting price will be 65 Immortal origin stones, the short auctioneer declared. Han Li's eyes lit up slightly at the sight of the blue scroll. This was indeed quite a formidable treasure that didn't contain any less law powers than the blue immortal sword from before, and the fact that it was a scroll indicated that it definitely had to have been more versatile than the sword, and much more difficult to refine. Even though it was slightly damaged, it was still quite a powerful treasure, and at this point the bidding had already begun, with the price quickly rising to 90 immortal origin stones. 95. Han Li had also placed a bid. He was quite interested in this immortal treasure, so he would be willing to purchase it as long as the price wasn't too high. 100. This bid was placed by the female cultivator, who had purchased the fire attribute demon core. Han Li took a glance at the female cultivator, and right as he was considering whether he would continue to participate in the bidding, another voice rang out from the front row of the venue. 150. Han Li immediately shook his head and decided to drop out of the bidding war. This was already higher than the price that the immortal sword had been purchased for, and all of the other bidders fell silent as well. 200. To everyone's surprise, the female cultivator who had purchased the demon core didn't give up, and she had raised the price by 50 more immortal origin stones in a single bid. Everyone faltered slightly upon hearing this before turning to her with peculiar looks in their eyes. 200 immortal origin stones wasn't exactly a massive sum. All of the auction-goers present were at least at the mid-true immortal stage, and they had come to participate in this auction, so they could naturally afford this sum. However, immortal origin stones were extremely useful. Not only could they speed up one's immortal spiritual power replenishment, they could also assist one in opening up immortal acupoints. Hence, true immortal cultivators were perpetually in need of more immortal origin stones, and they were very prudent with their spending of this resource. With that in mind, it simply wasn't worth spending 200 immortal origin stones for a damaged immortal treasure. However, this still wasn't the end of the bidding war. 230. The owner of the sharp voice retorted. 250. The female cultivator wasn't backing down either. 300. 350. Both of them seemed to have been determined to acquire the scroll, and in the blink of an eye, the price had been raised to an incredible level. Many of the auction-goers present were astonished by this turn of events. There was no way that a damaged, immortal treasure would have been worth this much unless it was harboring some type of secret. With that in mind, some other people began to throw in bids as well, and the price was quickly pushed above 800 immortal origin stones. At this point, everyone else dropped out of the bidding war, and it reverted back to a two-horse race. Blue light was flashing in Han Li's eyes as he carefully inspected the blue scroll with slightly furrowed brows, but no matter how he scrutinized it, he wasn't able to identify anything special about it aside from the profound glacial chi that it contained. On the surface, his glacial chi didn't appear to have been special in any way, but he noticed there seemed to have been more to it than met the eye after he inspected it with his spiritual sense a few times. This was a feeling that Han Li couldn't really describe, and if he had to compare it to something, then it was a little like the essence fire raven. After inspecting the scroll for a while longer, he withdrew his gaze. There was no way that he was going to spend so much money to acquire the scroll, so what was the point in thinking about all of this? 1,000. At this point, the owner of the sharp voice had already lost their composure, and it was clear that they were approaching their limit. 1,200. The female cultivator's voice remained as steady as ever. This time, the owner of the sharp voice was silent for a long while, yet right before the short auctioneer declared the scroll as sold, they made one final last-ditch effort. 1,500. 2,000. The female cultivator seemed to have finally run out of patience and placed an astonishing bid. Everyone was stunned beyond belief. This was a sufficient sum of immortal origin stones to purchase more than 10 immortal treasures. The owner of the sharp voice fell silent once again, and only after a long while did they give a cold harumph. Your determination is truly impressive. In that case, I'll relinquish the scroll to you." After that, they stood up and departed from the auction venue. Han Li looked on at their departing figure, and he was speculating whether they were leaving early as they were preparing to take the scroll from the female cultivator by force after the auction. With that in mind, he took a glance at the female cultivator, only to find that she appeared to have been completely unconcerned. The short auctioneer seemed to have been a little stunned as well, and it took him some time before he finally declared the sale of the profound glacial scenic painting. Even though the scroll could only go to one person, everyone else felt as if they had been treated to a good show, so they weren't all that disappointed. The auction continued, and the items were becoming more and more expensive, with many of the precious and exotic treasures being presented, posing a great deal of temptation even to Han Li. Unfortunately, none of the Dao pill ingredients were among them, and as for the other treasures, he did have a decent wealth of immortal origin stones, but he had to save up for his future pill refinement, so he could only let those treasures slip away right under his nose. After close to 2 more hours, the final auction item was sold, and the auction reached its conclusion. All right, that will be the end of the auction. It's now time for the free exchange event. Any fellow Taoists wishing to sell or exchange any treasures can feel free to step onto the stage in turns, the short auctioneer declared. Then made his way down from the auction platform, the 2 taller figures accompanying him. As soon as his voice trailed off, a streak of white light immediately flew onto the stage at an astonishing speed. There were several other cultivators who wanted to go first, but they could only stop in their tracks upon seeing this. In an exchange event like this, it was naturally best to go as early as possible. Otherwise, one risked having the treasures that they desired slipping away right before their eyes, and that was certainly not going to be a good feeling. "Looks like I'll be going first, fellow Taoists." The man on the stage chuckled as he cupped his fist in a salute toward the cultivators that he had beaten to the stage, and judging from the sound of his voice, he seemed to have been an elderly man. The ones who were beaten to the stage could only return to their seats, but there was one thin and tall figure who remained on the spot as he chuckled. "With your bright yang light wave arts, your speed is unmatched, Brother Q. Whenever I participate in any exchange events with you, you always beat me to the punch. Fancy meeting you here, Brother Fu. My sincerest apologies, but I truly am in urgent need of a certain treasure," the elderly man on the stage replied with a smile. The thin and tall figure merely shook his head in response, before returning to his seat as well. "Fellow Taoists, I've brought 2 things with me today," the elderly man said as he flipped a hand over to produce a pair of jade boxes, one large and one small. With a sweep of his sleeve, the lids of the boxes were removed to reveal their contents. Inside the larger jade box was a spirit plant that was around a foot in height and resembled a bamboo sapling with only 12 leaves. But what was remarkable was that every single leaf was a different color, and they were also all glowing slightly. This is a heavenly spirit bamboo that grows a leaf once every 10,000 years, so this is a 120,000-year-old specimen. As for what it can be used for, I'm sure everyone already knows, so I won't waste everyone's time with an explanation. Immediately thereafter, the elderly opened the other jade box to reveal some fine golden sand that was giving off such dazzling golden radiance that it was too bright to look directly at. This is profound golden sand, an exceptional material for refining metal attribute flying swords, and it can also be mixed into other immortal treasures to significantly enhance their resilience and sharpness, the elderly introduced. These 2 items immediately created a stir among the auction-goers, and it was clear that they had generated much interest. "For this heavenly spirit bamboo, I would like a meridian opening herb above 100,000 years of age." As for this box of profound golden sand, I would like a spirit material that contains earth attribute law powers in exchange, the elderly man declared. Han Li was very much interested in the heavenly spirit bamboo plant. This was a type of spirit plant that contained a hint of poison law powers, and theoretically speaking, it could be used as an ingredient to refine pills that could cure all poisons. There were some antidotal spirit plants in his medicine garden, but none that could compare with this one. Unfortunately, he hadn't even heard of this meridian-opening herb, and it was clear that the elderly man wouldn't have been willing to sell such a precious spirit plant for immortal origin stones. As for that box of profound golden sand, that wasn't of any interest to him. Right at this moment, a thin cultivator rose to his feet, then swept a hand through the air to release a burst of red light, enveloped within which was a rectangular jade box, which flew onto the auction platform. Will this meridian-opening herb suffice, fellow Taoist? The elderly man picked up the jade box and opened it ever so slightly, then immediately shut the lid again as he replied in a concise manner, "Deal." After that, he swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of white light that carried the heavenly spirit bamboo to the thin cultivator, and Han Li could only heave an internal sigh upon seeing this. However, there were no takers for the box of profound golden sand, and in the end, the elderly man could only step down from the stage. As soon as he left, a streak of green light immediately flew onto the stage like lightning, and it was none other than the man with the Fu surname from before. I've brought with me a stick of 7 spirit incense that can assist true immortal cultivators greatly when it comes to opening immortal acupoints. If you light this incense while attempting to open an immortal acupoint, your chances of success will be raised by about 10%. The man pulled out a sandalwood box as he spoke, then opened it to reveal a stick of red and black incense, which was already giving off an indescribable aroma even though it hadn't been lit. Almost all of the auction-goers immediately had their attention drawn to the stick of incense. Treasures that could help one make breakthroughs were naturally the most welcome items in these exchange events. The man with the Fu surname seemed to have been quite pleased with everyone's reactions, and he declared, "In exchange for this stick of incense, I would like a heavenly musk fruit." Unlike everyone else, Han Li wasn't very interested in this stick of incense. He was able to rely on the large number of pills he had refined to assist him in opening immortal acupoints, so this wasn't something that he was all that keen to get his hands on, and even if he did acquire it, he couldn't make more like he could with spirit medicines. The stick of 7 spirit incense was indeed quite rare and precious, but heavenly musk fruits weren't easy to come by, either, and in the end, no one was able to provide one. Many of the auction-goers offered to exchange the stick of incense for other spirit items, or to directly purchase it using immortal origin stones, but all of them were turned down. The exchange even continued, and one cultivator after another flew onto the stage to display their treasures. Some were fortunate enough to have been able to successfully find what they were looking for, but the vast majority of the items displayed weren't successfully exchanged. This wasn't much of a surprise. After all, this wasn't a very large event, and most of the cultivators present weren't itinerant cultivators. Hence, they were generally all figures of rather lofty status, and the things that they were looking for definitely weren't easy to obtain. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to participate in this exchange event. Han Li merely sat in his chair rather than competing with others to fly onto the stage. He watched as a procession of treasures was presented, and it was quite an eye-opening opportunity, one that rarely presented itself. As the exchange event neared its conclusion, there was gradually less and less competition between the people flying onto the stage, and there were even some instances of delays between one cultivator to the next. It was during one of those delays that Han Li decided to fly onto the stage, But right as he was about to do so, a streak of black light flew onto the stage ahead of him. Even though the blue and white light barrier, it could be seen that the figure was enshrouded in a cloud of black chi that was giving off a formidable, baleful aura. Hanli sat back down without saying anything, and just like everyone else, his gaze fell upon the figure on stage, wanting to see what it was that he was going to present. The figure enshrouded in black chi remained silent as he pulled out a pair of stone boxes that he placed down onto the auction platform, and with a sweep of his sleeve, the lids of both of the boxes flew off at once to reveal a semi-transparent purple crystal and a rather strange-looking ball of black mud. The crystal was around the size of a human fist, and its surface was riddled with pits and bumps, as well as overlapping purple lightning veins. These lightning veins were constantly flashing with purple lightning, as if they were lightning captured in solid form, and they were giving off a violent lightning aura. As for the ball of black mud, it appeared to have been rather unremarkable at first glance, but upon closer inspection, one would notice that it was giving off a layer of extremely faint black light that seemed to be able to devour all surrounding light, giving it a very mysterious appearance. I'm exchanging this lightning soul crystal for a lightning attribute immortal treasure, or 300 immortal origin stones, and this ball of high zenith yin mud for a 100,000-year-old yin dragon ginseng, the figure declared. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. He had thought that he had become far more knowledgeable about the spirit materials of the immortal realm since joining the Blaze Dragon Dao, but it seemed that this was still very much a work in progress, as he hadn't heard of either of those two types of materials. His gaze settled on the ball of black mud for a moment before quickly moving onto the purple crystal. The ball of black mud was clearly some type of yin attribute material, so he didn't have any use for it at the moment, but the purple crystal was giving him a sense of familiarity. The lightning power imbued within it was very similar to the purple lightning in the clam bead he had obtained from the thunderstorm sea, and he couldn't help but wonder if this crystal had come from the same place. The purple crystal wasn't very large, but it contained a truly formidable amount of lightning power, far more so than even that purple clam bead. There were also faint spiritual fluctuations emanating from the deepest part of the crystal, indicating that the lightning power contained within it was so dense and abundant that it had developed some sentience. Han Li was carefully inspecting the crystal, with a thoughtful look in his eyes, when a voice suddenly rang out in his mind. Taoist Zai had woken up, and he communicated to Han Li through their psychic connection. "Fellow Taoist Han, please purchase this lightning soul crystal. It will be of great use to me." Ever since fusing with the golden immortal puppet, Taoist Zai had been in a state of hibernation, and Han Li had attempted to contact it a few times to no avail. "What is this lightning soul crystal, and how will it be useful to you, fellow Taoist Zai?" Han Li asked. The lightning soul crystal is a type of special crystal that will only arise in places with extremely abundant lightning power. And not only does it contain immense lightning power, there's a type of special spiritual power interspersed within it as well. Not only is it very beneficial to those using lightning attribute cultivation arts, it can also be worn to nourish the soul and avoid the negative influence of inner demons. I've been striving to completely fuse with the golden immortal puppet this entire time, but progress has been very slow. With this crystal, I'll be able to gain complete control over the puppet in a very short time, Taoist Zai explained. "I see," Han Li replied with a contemplative expression. As their communication was taking place, the other cultivators present were also appraising the two items on display, but no one was saying anything, and it seemed like there weren't going to be any takers. The black figure remained standing still on the stage in silence, seemingly unfazed by the lack of response. A short while later, a slightly raspy voice rang out to break the silence. Are you not going to introduce these two types of materials? Pardon my ignorance, but I've never heard of this lightning soul crystal or this high zenith yin mud before. I'm only offering these two things to those who know their true value, the black figure replied in an indifferent voice. The one who had raised the question fell silent upon hearing this. Right at this moment, a streak of light flew onto the stage, and it was none other than Han Li. I'll take the lightning soul crystal. Here are 300 immortal origin stones. He pulled out a storage pouch and tossed it at the black figure as he spoke. Right at this moment, another portly cultivator also flew onto the stage, then pulled out a flying bident that was flashing with dazzling lightning as he declared, "Hold on. I have a lightning attribute immortal treasure refined using lightning rays steel that I'm willing to exchange for this lightning soul crystal." The black figure faltered slightly as he took a glance at Han Li's storage pouch and the flying bident, then accepted Han Li's storage pouch in silence before handing the lightning soul crystal to him. "Hold on a second. If I'm not mistaken, surely you want a lightning attribute immortal treasure more than those immortal origin stones," the portly cultivator hurriedly said. "That's true, but you're a little too late," the black figure replied in an indifferent voice. The portly cultivator faltered slightly upon hearing this, clearly not anticipating such a response. In the end, he could only stow his flying bident away again before flying back to his seat. "I hope you won't regret this." Han Li was also rather surprised by the black figure's decision, and his surprise was also tinged with a hint of admiration. It was very rare to see someone who could abide by their word so strictly, particularly in the often deceitful and immoral world of cultivators. For a mid-true immortal cultivator, it was only a matter of time and energy for them to accumulate 300 immortal origin stones, but the same certainly didn't apply when it came to acquiring a suitable immortal treasure, particularly a lightning attribute one. Perhaps the portly cultivator was also aware of the value of the lightning soul crystal, just like Taoist Zai, but he was slightly unwilling to part with his lightning attribute immortal treasure, and that had allowed Han Li to seize the initiative. With that in mind, he gave the black figure a nod, then returned to his chair. "Give me the lightning soul crystal," Taoist Zai urged as soon as Han Li sat down. Han Li duly obliged, sending the lightning soul crystal in his storage bracelet to Taoist Zai. The lightning soul crystal instantly vanished into Taoist Zai's body amid a flash of golden lightning, and only then did Han Li notice that Shu Tian's seat was vacant. He took a glance at his surroundings, but failed to discover Shu Tian anywhere in the venue, and it seemed that he really had left. His brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, but he didn't think much of it. On the auction platform, the black figure waited for a while longer, but there were no takers for his high zenith yin mud, so he could only fly back down from the stage in the end. Han Li rose to his feet upon seeing this, yet right as he was about to fly onto the stage, a female voice suddenly rang out from beside him. "You must be fellow Taoist Li, right?" Immediately thereafter, the female cultivator who had purchased the profound glacial scenic painting earlier appeared in Shu Tian's seat. "Hooray you?" Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. The female cultivator dodged the question as she asked, "Would I be able to take up some of your time?" Han Li hesitated momentarily, then sat back down as he nodded in response. "Just now, I happened to notice you trading a blush cloud fire crystal with the fellow Taoist that was sitting here before me. Do you have any more of these crystals in your possession? And if so, would you be willing to trade them? I'll be sure to offer you a satisfactory price. For a fist-sized crystal like the one from before, I'm willing to offer you 100 immortal origin stones, and the more you have to sell, the better," the female cultivator said in an earnest voice. "You seem to already be aware that I have more blush cloud fire crystals in my possession, and you also know my surname. I'm assuming Shu Tian must have told you those things, right? Han Li asked in a calm voice. The female cultivator nodded in response. I did indeed learn these things from the fellow Taoist from before. Han Li's expression remained unchanged, but he was contemplating how to proceed. Blush cloud fire crystals were extremely precious, but he had quite a few of them, and he didn't really need them at the moment, so he was certainly open to selling them for immortal origin stones. However, he wasn't sure if he was going to have a use for them in the future, and if he were to sell them now, he could be left regretting his decision at some later point. Agree to her offer, fellow Taoist Han. Taoist Zai's voice had suddenly rung out again. Why? Han Li asked through their spiritual connection. I'll tell you why once I've completely fused with the golden immortal puppet. For now, just agree to her offer, Taoist Zai said, then fell silent again. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing Taoist Zai's ambiguous response, but after a brief hesitation, he nodded as he replied, All right, I can sell my crystals to you. You've definitely made a wise decision, fellow Taoist. I can assure you that no one else would be willing to offer such a high price for these crystals. The female cultivator's voice was a little cold, but there was an unmistakable hint of elation as she spoke. Han Li offered no response as he swept a hand over his storage pouch, and a new storage pouch appeared in his grasp with a flash of azure light. He handed the storage pouch to the female cultivator, who accepted it before inspecting its contents with her spiritual sense. Then immediately flipped a hand over to produce a storage pouch of her own that she handed to Han Li. Han Li accepted the storage pouch and merely took a glance at it before giving the female cultivator a nod. The female cultivator cupped her fist in a salute, then returned to her original seat. Han Li looked on at her departing figure, and his brows furrowed ever so slightly. Thanks to his immense spiritual sense, he was able to see through the blue and white light barrier to make out a blurry outline of the woman's figure, and he felt as if he had seen her from somewhere before. All of a sudden, he recalled who she was. She's the woman in red staying at the same inn as me. Not only that, but the woman had struck him with a sense of familiarity back when he first saw her in the inn, and during their second meeting here, that sense of familiarity had only grown more pronounced. Right at this moment, another cultivator just so happened to have stepped down from the stage, and Han Li immediately flew onto the auction platform, then displayed some of the precious materials in his possession while laying out the Tao pill ingredients that he wanted. Unfortunately, none of the auction-goers had any of those materials, and he was ultimately disappointed once again. Close to an hour later, the final cultivator stepped down from the stage, and the exchange event drew to a conclusion. Han Li issued the immortal origin stones required to purchase the blood crystal lotus root, then examined it briefly before carefully storing it into a jade box. After that, he adhered a few talismans to the box before stowing it away in his storage bracelet. A short while later, Han Li appeared on a quiet street in White Jade City. Fellow Taoist Han, I require a formation to help me refine this lightning soul crystal, Taoist Zai requested. What do you need me to prepare? Han Li asked as he continued to walk down the street without pause. A stream of information was immediately transmitted into his mind, laying out the method and materials required to set up a formation. All right, I'll get everything prepared as soon as possible, then arrange a secret chamber for you back on the Crimson Dawn Peak, Han Li said. There were quite a few materials on the list, some of which weren't that easy to find, and it would have most likely taken him quite some time and effort to gather these materials under normal circumstances. But with all of these powers gathered in White Jade City and his membership in the Transient Guild, he was sure that it wouldn't have been very difficult to gather everything as long as he was willing to do some spending. Furthermore, the formation did appear to have been rather complex, but that wasn't an issue for him. There's no need for that. We can just get it done in the inn's secret chamber. With the help of the formation, I should be able to completely fuse with the puppet in the next few days, Taoist Zai said. Han Li nodded in response, then flew toward the nearest materials shop. Only after night had fallen did he return to the inn where he was staying, and after entering the secret chamber, he flipped a hand over to produce a stack of formation flags, then casually tossed them through the air, distributing them around the room in a rather peculiar formation. Immediately thereafter, he began to chant an incantation, and 5 light barriers of different thicknesses appeared to encompass the entire room. After that, Han Li swept a hand through the air to release a burst of azure light, which carried all of the furniture into the room to one corner to vacate a large space, then summoned a bunch of different objects, including some lengths of lightning-restraining wood. All of a sudden, Han Li's expression changed ever so slightly as he pulled a purple talisman that was riddled with silver patterns out of his storage bracelet. It was that Azure Wind Lock Immortal talisman, and he had spotted it in a corner of his storage bracelet while summoning all of the other items required for the formation. All of a sudden, it occurred to him that the woman in red was none other than the woman who had given him this Azure Wind Lock Immortal talisman, Gan Jiuzhen. Her aura was slightly different from Gan Jiuzhen's, perhaps because she had intentionally altered it, and that was why he had only just made this realization. I didn't think that she would be here in White Jade City as well, Han Li murmured to himself, then shook his head to rid himself of that train of thought before stowing the Azure Wind Lock Immortal talisman away again. He wasn't particularly close with Gan Jiuzhen, and he didn't care to know the reason behind why she had come to the Blaze Dragon Dao. Presumably, it didn't have anything to do with him. After taking a moment to settle his thoughts, he began to make some inscriptions on the ground. After several hours of toil, day had transitioned into night, and a circular formation that was around 100 feet in diameter had appeared on the ground in the room. The center of the formation was riddled with spirit patterns that were surrounded by lengths of lightning-restraining wood, which were crackling with lightning. Han Li exhaled as he patted his storage pouch, and a streak of golden light flew out before landing at the center of the formation to reveal Taoist Zai. Taoist Zai inspected its surroundings momentarily, then gave Han Li a nod before sitting down with its legs crossed. "Do you need me to look out for you during the process, Brother Zai?" Han Li asked. "There's no need for that, I'll be fine on my own," Taoist Zai replied. "In that case, I'll leave you to it," Han Li replied with a nod. There were still a few days left until the preaching ceremony, and he wanted to take advantage of this window of opportunity to search for some more Dao pill ingredients, so he didn't want to waste any time here unless his presence was necessary. Meanwhile, Taoist Zai quickly sprang into action, making a hand seal as it began to chant an incantation, and thick arcs of golden lightning emerged from its chest before spreading all over its entire body. Arcs of golden lightning also emerged from the formation on the ground, before forming a series of profound lightning runes that resonated with the golden lightning flashing over Taoist Zai's body, quickly intertwining with one another before slowly revolving on the spot. In the blink of an eye, a flashing ball of golden lightning had appeared around Taoist Zai, and arcs of lightning were surging over its surface, while the occasional bolt of stray lightning would spring forth in a random direction. Thankfully, 5 layers of restrictions had already been set up in the room to contain the bolts of stray lightning. Instead of immediately departing, Han Li remained in one corner of the room to observe the process. A loud thunderclap rang out from Taoist Zai's head, and arcs of dazzling purple lightning emerged to envelop the entirety of its head. A crystalline object could be seen within the purple lightning, and it was none other than that lightning soul crystal. Compared with the lightning released by the clam pearl, this purple lightning was brighter and more translucent. The purple lightning continued to flash as it rapidly spread over Taoist Zai's body, and the light radiating from the puppet's body became even brighter, as if some important points had been opened up. Hanli gave a slight nod upon seeing this, and he was just about to depart when the purple lightning erupting out of the lightning soul crystal abruptly swelled. At the same time, it began to spread over Taoist Zai's body faster than before, and it quickly fused with the golden ball of lightning around it. The ball of golden lightning instantly began to ripple, and a huge bulge appeared on its surface. A resounding boom rang out as the bulge exploded, and arcs of purple and golden lightning erupted in all directions to strike the first azure restriction in the room. The restriction only lasted a second or two before being violently torn apart, and the remaining lightning continued onward to strike the second yellow restriction, which quickly dimmed and appeared to have been on the verge of breaking as well. Not only that, but a second bulge had exploded on the ball of golden lightning, sending even thicker bolts of lightning erupting everywhere. Hanli's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and 4 true spirit projections emerged around him, namely that of the Xuanwu, the lightning bird, the giant mountain ape, and the divine dragon. The 4 beast projections opened their mouths in unison to release bursts of black, silver, yellow, and red light, respectively into the remaining 4 restrictions. As a result, the 4 restrictions were instantly significantly bolstered, becoming several times thicker than before. And the yellow light barrier abruptly brightened as a giant ape projection appeared on its surface. Thick bolts of lightning struck the yellow light barrier, producing loud clangs that resembled the sound of metal striking against metal, and the light barrier began to flash erratically. The giant ape projection on its surface quickly began to dim, and it was also rapidly thinning at a rate that was discernible even to the naked eye. Hanli immediately began to chant an incantation while making a rapid string of hand seals, and a series of 4-colored halos instantly swept out of the 4 light barriers before proliferating outward in all directions. The 4 light barriers then fused into a single 4-colored light barrier that was several feet thick and was giving off a metallic sheen. As soon as it took shape, it was immediately struck by bolts of golden and purple lightning, only for the bolts of lightning to instantly vanish into the light barrier without a trace. The 4-colored light barrier shuddered a few times, but displayed no signs of breaking. Hanli's expression eased slightly upon seeing this, but he still maintained his hand seal. As time passed, the 4 true spirit projections around him became clearer and clearer, and they were continuously releasing pillars of light into the 4-colored light barrier to bolster it. This entire time, Taoist Zai's remained seated at the center of the formation, with its eyes tightly shut, and it seemed to have been completely oblivious to its surroundings. Hanli was left feeling a little speechless upon seeing this. If he hadn't intervened in a timely fashion, all 5 of the light barriers would have been torn apart, and the entire inn would have been destroyed, thereby revealing the golden, immortal puppet. After a moment of hesitation, Hanli decided to ask Taoist Zai what was happening through voice transmission, yet he received no response, and it was as if Taoist Zai hadn't heard him at all. Hanli didn't say anything further, but his plans to leave were naturally foiled, and he decided to stay and observe the unfolding situation. Several hours quickly passed by, and not only had the purple lightning erupting out of Taoist Zai's head not abated in the slightest, it was only becoming brighter and more powerful. The ball of golden lightning was becoming more and more unstable as it churned violently, while even thicker bolts of purple and golden lightning were erupting in all directions without displaying any signs of stopping. Hanli continued to support the 4-colored light barrier while standing in the corner of the room, and there was a slightly dark look on his face. Given this current situation, it was clear that he wouldn't be able to leave anytime soon. 3 days later, Han Li was seated on the ground with his legs crossed, continuing to maintain the four-colored light barrier. At the center of the formation, Taoist Zai's entire body was enveloped in purple lightning, making it appear as if it were wearing a suit of purple lightning armor. The ball of golden lightning formed by the formation had also swelled significantly in size, taking up close to half the entire room, and it didn't seem as if it were going to fade away anytime soon. Han Li's expression had darkened even further. The preaching ceremony was going to begin on this day, and he didn't know when this process was going to conclude. If he were delayed any longer, then he would have to miss the preaching ceremony altogether. If he had known that this would happen, then he would have taken Taoist Zai back to the Crimson Dawn Peak. The restrictions in the cave abode there had been set up by him over the course of many years, and they were far more formidable than the ones here. So even without HSI support, they should have been able to contain the lightning that was constantly erupting in all directions. However, it was too late to think about that now. At this point, there was no way that he could leave. Otherwise, it was very likely that all of the prior efforts that he had made would go to waste. Right at this moment, the lightning formation began to glow with dazzling radiance, while countless lightning runes emerged everywhere. Han Li hurriedly focused his attention on the formation, right as a string of crackling rang out. The purple lightning around Taoist Zai's body swelled drastically before being absorbed into its body in a flash, while the surrounding ball of golden lightning also fluctuated violently before also surging into Taoist Zai's body in a frenzy. At the center of the formation, Taoist Zai's entire body was radiating yellow, golden, and purple light. The three types of light weren't conflicting with one another in the slightest. Instead, they were fused together in a harmonious balance. Countless three-colored spirit patterns were surging incessantly over the surface of its body, occasionally coming together to form a series of formations, only to then split apart a moment later. A golden, immortal stage aura was also emanating out of the puppet, and unlike in the past, this burst of spiritual pressure was completely smooth and uninhibited. Han Li was ecstatic, and he bolstered the four-colored light barrier in the room even further to contain this burst of golden, immortal stage spiritual pressure. All of a sudden, Taoist Zai opened its eyes, releasing two bursts of dazzling light out of its pupils. The two bursts of light shot through the four-colored light barrier with ease to create a pair of large holes, then pierced through the walls of the inn as well before erupting into the heavens, where they disappeared without a trace. Thankfully, the two bursts of light were traveling diagonally upward and didn't harm anyone. Han Li was greatly startled by this, and he hurriedly made a hand seal to mend the two holes in the four-colored light barrier. Meanwhile, the streaks of light flew into the sky above White Jade City before exploding violently, and all of the world's origin chi above the city was swept up into a violently frenzy, as gusts of fierce, yellow, golden, and purple wind surged through the heavens, releasing a burst of enormous spiritual pressure as they did so. The three gusts of wind were howling through the air with extraordinary force, and all of the cultivators throughout White Jade City were stunned by what they were seeing. There's no way this amount of spiritual pressure can be released by a true immortal. Could it be that one of the Tao Lords has arrived in White Jade City? Many of the people on the streets outside had erupted into chatter, while Han Li was frantically making hand seals to isolate Taoist Zai's aura, preventing it from leaking any further. At the same time, he had released his spiritual sense to encompass everything within a radius of several thousand kilometers of the inn, so that he would be able to immediately detect any disturbance. Those two streaks of light had flown out of the city in the blink of an eye, and on top of that, the preaching ceremony was scheduled for this very day. So many of the cultivators in the city had already left. The small portion of cultivators that remained may not have been able to detect that the aura had come from the inn, and everyone was wary of golden immortal cultivators. So even if someone did make the connection, they most likely wouldn't have dared to approach the inn to confirm their suspicions. The three-colored gale in the sky continued to swirl around for a while before quickly dissipating. It had created quite a spectacular sight to behold, but it hadn't caused any damage, so the people in the city only discussed the fleeting phenomenon for a short while before quickly dispersing, much to Han Li's relief. At the center of the formation, Taoist Zai rose to its feet, and the light radiating from its body faded alongside the enormous spiritual pressure it was releasing. "Finally, I've successfully fused with this puppet," Taoist Zai declared. "Didn't you say that you were fine on your own and didn't require my presence? If I hadn't decided to stay for a moment longer, you would have attracted a great deal of trouble for us," Han Li said in a slightly accusatory manner. He had spent the entirety of the past 3 days here, rendering him unable to participate in any of the auctions and exchange events in the city. At times like this, it was often the case that the most precious treasures would emerge near the end, and if he had been free to shop around these past 3 days, perhaps he would have been able to gather a few Dao pill ingredients. Taoist Zai could hear the displeasure in Han Li's voice, and it explained, "I failed to anticipate how pure the lightning soul crystal was and how much power it contained." "So be it. In any case, it's fantastic news that you were able to successfully fuse with this puppet, and I should congratulate you for it," Han Li said as a smile appeared on his face. "Thank you for acquiring this immortal puppet for me and for looking out for me these past few days. If it wasn't for your help, there's no way I would have been able to complete this process smoothly. I'll remember everything you've done for me," Taoist Zai said as it cupped its fist in a grateful salute. Han Li merely waved a hand in response. "The power that you inadvertently released just now hasn't exposed us, but even so, we can't stay here any longer. On top of that, the preaching ceremony is about to begin, so let's get out of here." Taoist Zai nodded in response, then flew into Han Li's storage bracelet as a streak of yellow light. Han Li swept a hand through to release a burst of yellow light to repair the 2 small holes on the wall, then emerged from his room. Right as he was about to go downstairs, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, then cast his gaze toward the other direction down the corridor. After releasing his spiritual sense just now, he had already detected that Gan Jiuzhen was no longer here. A slightly peculiar look appeared on his face, and he quickly withdrew his gaze before making his way downstairs. A thought occurred to him as he asked through voice transmission, "By the way, you told me that you were going to tell me the reason why you asked me to sell those blush cloud fire crystals after you fused with the puppet. Can you tell me the reason now?" Instead of answering Han Li's question, Taoist Zai raised one of its own. "Fellow Taoist Han, what do you think is used as the power source for this golden immortal puppet?" Han Li was rather taken aback by this question, while Taoist Zai continued, "All immortal puppets run on immortal origin stones, and this one is no exception. On top of that, this puppet possesses golden immortal stage power, and it's extremely costly to use. The number of immortal spirit stones that you previously had on hand was nowhere near enough. How many immortal origin stones are required for you to unleash this puppet's full power?" Han Li asked. "If I were to go all out, I would have to burn through 10 immortal origin stones per second," Taoist Zai replied. Han Li was already mentally prepared, but he was still caught off guard. "What, 10 per second? That's not that much. Immortal puppets require an enormous amount of immortal spiritual power for support, and there are some that use up dozens, even hundreds of times as many immortal origin stones per second," Taoist Zai said. "Have you seen such puppets before, Brother Zai?" Han Li asked. "No, it's just that I've regained some memories as I was fusing with the lightning soul crystal," Taoist Zai explained. "Oh, have you recalled anything about your former owner?" Han Li asked with an intrigued look in his eyes. He was very interested in this person. Taoist Zai had told him in the past that its previous owner was dead, but it was still yet to be seen whether that was actually true. "I've only recovered some bits and pieces of memories, most of which are related to immortal puppets. As for those blush cloud fire crystals that you sold, you managed to obtain over 3,000 immortal origin stones for them, and that's enough to call upon my power several times," Taoist Zai said. "I see. In any case, it's about time that we left," Han Li replied with a nod, then cast his gaze toward the white Jade Peak. It was a bright and sunny day on the white Jade Peak. There were pristine white clouds drifting over the clear, blue sky, and a rainbow was also hanging in the heavens like a giant bridge that stood above the clouds. High up in the sky were hundreds of golden chariots that were drawn by winged dragon horses, and upon those carriages stood teams of tall cultivators wielding silver halberds and clad in suits of golden armor, patrolling the sky in a radius of several hundred kilometers. The entirety of the white Jade Peak was enshrouded under a golden light barrier that acted as a flight restriction, and it wasn't giving off any particularly powerful energy fluctuations. As long as one was at or above the true immortal stage, they would be able to fly into it without being affected, but those who were at or below the grand ascension stage would have been kept out by the light barrier. Hence, upon reaching the foot of the white Jade Peak, the majority of the Blaze Dragon Tao's disciples were forced to climb the mountain on foot in order to attend the preaching ceremony. At this moment, the white plaza on the mountain was extremely lively and bustling, with hundreds of thousands of Blaze Dragon Tao disciples and the core elders of many of the Blaze Dragon Tao's subsidiary sects present. Even after all of the cushions had been occupied, there were still more people constantly arriving, and the plaza was quickly becoming extremely packed. In fact, some people had even begun resorting to sitting down, with their legs crossed somewhere halfway up the mountain, to await the commencement of the ceremony. There were countless people gathered at the foot of the white Jade Peak as well, and it was no less crowded than on the plaza on the mountain summit. However, there was a more diverse range of people gathered at the foot of the mountain, with many cultivators from some other small and medium-sized sects, all over the ancient cloud continent interspersed among the Blaze Dragon Tao disciples. These people had set up a series of stalls along the paths leading up to the white Jade Peak, and these stalls were packed with treasures, pills, and materials that they were selling to passers-by. There were also Blaze Dragon Tao cultivators that were clad in suits of golden armor standing around the stalls at set intervals, patrolling the area to maintain order. In contrast with the exchange events that Han Li had previously participated in, these stalls were mostly aimed at cultivators at or below the deity transformation stage, and it was much like the Great South meeting that he had attended back in the mortal realm. At the center of the preaching platform on the summit of the white Jade Peak was a large purple table that didn't have many engravings on its surface, nor did it appear all that beautiful or intricate, but it did have a more antiquated and natural appearance. Behind the table was a copper cauldron that was around 10 feet tall, plunged into which were several hundred sticks of incense, all of which were lit and producing plumes of faint azure smoke. On either side of the cauldron were close to 100 round gray cushions placed down in a symmetrical fashion, and at this moment, streaks of light were constantly approaching the scene before sitting down on the normal cushions on the stone staircase around the platform. The only ones who were granted spots on the stone staircase were inner and outer sect true immortal stage elders of the Blaze Dragon Tao, as well as all of the Tao Lord's core disciples, and given their lofty status, they were naturally far more restrained, so it was a lot less rowdy on the stone staircase than it was on the plaza. Most of them were meditating with their eyes closed, silently waiting for the ceremony to commence, and only a small portion of them were greeting acquaintances or chatting quietly with one another. Right at this moment, a streak of azure light flew in from the southwestern direction, then descended onto the preaching platform to reveal none other than Han Li. He took a glance to find that all of the cushions near the top of the platform had already been taken, but there were still many vacant spots on the lower parts of the staircase. Han Li made his way up the staircase, and after ascending for around 100 steps, he spotted a familiar figure waving at him to his left. It was none other than Qi Liang, and Han Li gave him a smile before approaching him and sitting down onto the empty cushion next to him. "You're a little late, Brother Li. All of the good spots up there have already been taken," Qi Liang said with a smile. "It's fine. All I need to do is listen and absorb Tao Lord Bailey's teachings. Why fret over whether I'm close or far away from the platform?" Han Li replied with a nonchalant shake of his head. "Such a mindset is certainly true to your character, Brother Li. No wonder you've been able to make such rapid progress in your cultivation. If you ask me, once you reach the late true immortal stage in the next 10,000 years, you'll be able to claim a spot among one of the 36 deputy Tao Lords. Make sure not to forget about me when that happens," Qi Liang chuckled. "You're far too kind, Brother Qi. Unless I can attain the great Tao during this very preaching ceremony, there's no way I could make another breakthrough in the next 10,000 years," Han Li replied with a wry smile. Qi Liang burst into laughter upon hearing this, then changed the subject. "By the way, I haven't seen you at all these past few days. Could it be that you've already obtained the treasures that you're looking for?" "If it were so easy to find what I'm looking for, then I wouldn't have been struggling with the task for so long. There were some unforeseen matters that I had to take care of the past few days, and that's why I came here so late," Han Li replied in an ambiguous manner. "Indeed, I had thought that I would be able to secure some prized treasures during such an auspicious event, but I still wasn't able to find any of the things that I've been searching for," Qi Liang sighed in response. While Han Li and Qi Liang were chatting with one another, a deafening boom suddenly rang out in the sky, and the two of them hurriedly looked up to see a massive bolt of purple lightning crashing down from the heavens, aimed at a certain spot on the white jade platform. After the bolt of lightning faded, around a dozen figures emerged, one of which was the purple-robed Aoyang Qiushan, the current managing Tao Lord of the Blaze Dragon Tao. As for the dozen or so figures accompanying him, all of them had restrained their own auras, but many of the Blaze Dragon Tao's members had already identified them to have been deputy Tao Lords of the sect. Aoyang Qiushan sat on one of the cushions in the first row situated to the left of the cauldron, and only after that did all of the deputy Tao Lords accompanying him sit down as well. As soon as this collection of important figures appeared on the platform, all of the Blaze Dragon Tao elders and disciples seated on the surrounding stone staircase instantly sat up straighter, while the chatter around the platform also gradually died down. Even the exchange events taking place at the foot of the mountain had been put on pause, and everyone was looking up at the mountain summit. In the blink of an eye, the entire area within a radius of hundreds of kilometers of the white jade platform had fallen completely silent. A few minutes later, a gust of golden wind swept forth from the distant sky, then faded as it neared the platform to reveal 7 or 8 figures. The two figures that were leading the way were quite peculiar in appearance. One of them appeared to have been no different from a normal woman, except she had silver skin and a pair of thin and pointy ears. Standing next to her was a burly man with his face covered in golden fur and scales growing on his eyelids. The 5 or 6 figures behind them clearly also weren't human. The silver-skinned woman and the golden-furred man each gave a nod to Aoyang Qiushan, then sat down onto the cushions next to him before their entourage sat down as well. Han Li had never seen these two people before, but it was clear that they were most likely also golden immortal stage Tao lords, while those accompanying them had to have been deputy Tao lords as well. Not long after their arrival, a woman in a black dress with a black veil concealing her face arrived atop a giant black crow steed. In contrast with the previous Tao lords to have arrived, she was doing so on her own without an entourage, and she gave Yang Qiushan a brief greeting before sitting down on a cushion not far away from him. Immediately after her came a handsome man with a head of long golden hair, and he was accompanied by 15 or 16 deputy Tao lords. Over the course of the next hour, more and more Tao lords and deputy Tao lords arrived, and Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai only arrived when there were only 2 vacant cushions left in the front row to the left of the cauldron. On this day, not only had Taoist Hu Yan changed into a pristine white robe, his hair was also immaculately groomed, and he was clean-shaven as well, indicating that he was taking this event quite seriously. Yun Nai was walking along beside him with a faint smile on her face, and she was still just as seductive as ever, with many of the Tao lords and deputy Tao lords unconsciously lowering their heads, not daring to look at her. Yang Qiushan was rather taken aback to see Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai arriving together, and he rose to his feet for the first time after sitting down as he smiled and said, "Welcome, fellow Taoist Hu Yan, fellow Taoist Yun. Now that you're here, everyone has arrived." "Surely we're not late. Tao Lord Bailey isn't even here yet," Taoist Hu Yan said as he took a glance at Yang Qiushan. "Indeed, but it's about time for the ceremony to begin, so please take your seats," Yang Qiushan said as he took a glance at Yun Nai. Taoist Hu Yan gave an indifferent nod in response, before making his way toward the 2 vacant cushions with Yun Nai. Han Li remained seated with his legs crossed as his gaze roamed over all of these figures that he had never seen before. He discovered that aside from the silver-skinned woman and the golden-furred man, there was another demonic man among the 12 Tao lords, while the rest were all human. As for the 36 deputy Tao lords, the only ones who weren't human were the ones that had accompanied those 2 demonic Tao lords here. Out of all of these people, he only recognized a few, including Shan. These people formed the core of the entire Blaze Dragon Tao, and at this moment, they were all gathered on the summit of the White Jade Peak. Even though they were all restraining their auras, everyone around the platform was still struck by a sense of asphyxiation. The entire mountain summit had become even more quiet, while the atmosphere was also a little tense. Around 15 minutes later, a burst of 5 colored lights suddenly appeared in the distant sky, enveloped within which was a huge 5-colored camel, and it was rapidly approaching the scene. The camel was around 1,000 feet in size with circles of 5-colored runes inscribed all over its body, and the 2 humps on its back resembled a pair of small mountains. Seated atop one of the humps was an elderly man in a colorful robe. "Yu Yangzi of the 5 Light Temple has come to observe the ceremony," the elderly man declared as he approached the platform. "Long time no see, fellow Taoist Yu Yangzi. You're still looking as fine as ever. Would you happen to have any surplus 5 light pills? I've been wanting to get some for a very long time, but they've proved very elusive to find," Yang Qiushan greeted with a smile. "Of course I always have some to spare for you, fellow Taoist Yang. As long as it's not too much, I can certainly spare 2 or 3 vials," Yu Yangzi replied with a smile as he descended onto the White Jade platform. "Fantastic, I also have some dense summer earth here. Are you interested, fellow Taoist?" Yang Qiushan asked. An elated look appeared on Yu Yangzi's face upon hearing this, and he hurriedly replied, "Really? I'm happy to take all of it off your hands, just state your price." "There's no hurry, fellow Taoist Yu Yangzi. Once the ceremony is over, you can come to my cave abode and we'll discuss the matter over some tea," Yang Qiushan said. "All right, I'll be sure to come," Yu Yangzi replied with a nod. The Five-Light Temple wasn't quite on the same level as the Blaze Dragon Dao, but it was still a vastly renowned sect in the northern glacial Immortal region, and that was why he had been arranged a seat in the first row to the right of the cauldron. Shortly thereafter, a vast expanse of black light swept in from the distant sky, containing a massive black ink stone with intricate floral designs engraved upon it, giving it a gorgeous appearance. Layman Mo of the Fleeing Palace has come to attend the preaching ceremony, a low and raspy voice declared from the inkstone. After that, the inkstone abruptly vanished to reveal a black-skinned elderly man who was no more than 5 feet tall and was stroking his own thick beard. "Welcome, Layman Mo," Ayang Qiushan said as he rose to his feet and cupped his fist in a salute. Layman Mo merely returned his salute in a half-hearted fashion before walking past him, and Ayang Qiushan's expression stiffened ever so slightly, but he quickly recovered his composure and sat back down. Meanwhile, Layman Mo approached Taoist Hu Yan with a wide smile as he asked, "Why haven't you come to my fleeting palace these past 10,000 years, you old drunk? Could it be that you've already forgotten this drinking buddy of yours? You're one to talk. You went into seclusion for tens of thousands of years without coming out even once. I visited you so many times, only to be kept out like some unwelcome guest. Having said that, you really did come at the right time. I've saved up quite a bit of fine wine that's not inferior to your ink cloud spirit wine," Taoist Hu Yan declared with a proud expression. A furious look immediately appeared on Layman Mo's face upon hearing this. "There's no wine in this world that's more delectable than the ink cloud spirit wine I've personally brewed. You haven't even had a drink yet, and you're already spouting drunk nonsense. When have you ever been able to acquire a wine that's superior to mine? You can find out if my claims are true or not after the ceremony," Taoist Hu Yan replied, taking a glance at Yun Nai out of the corner of his eye as he spoke. "All right, you better not disappoint me." A wide smile appeared on Layman Mo's face as he made his way over to the right side of the cauldron before taking a seat next to Yu Yangzi. Before long, around a dozen of the cushions to the right of the cauldron had been occupied, while roughly half of them remained vacant. This wasn't because there weren't that many people from other sects who wanted to attend the ceremony. On the contrary, the number of sects that wanted to be in attendance far surpassed this, but most of them were rather small and weak, so they had been arranged seats in other parts of the plaza. The spots on the platform itself were limited, and it would have been rather unsightly for too many people to be crammed onto it. All of a sudden, a burst of laughter rang out in the distant sky, and a streak of blue light shot forth from afar, flying into the golden light barrier before hovering in the air outside of the white jade platform. Luo Qinghai of the Vast Flow Palace has come to attend the ceremony. An enormous blue flower that was around 1,000 feet in size bloomed within the burst of blue light with this declaration, and there were around a dozen figures standing atop the giant flower, all of whom were wearing the same blue robes and giving off formidable auras. Everyone from the Blaze Dragon Dao instantly erupted into chatter upon seeing this. Luo Qinghai was the current palace master of the Vast Flow Place, which ranked alongside the Blaze Dragon Dao as one of the 3 leading powers of the northern glacial Immortal region. Han Li quickly recalled all of the information that he had read about the Vast Flow Palace as he also cast his gaze upward, just like everyone else. Within the giant blue flower was a large golden throne, upon which sat a tall and thin middle-aged man with hair that was as white as snow. He had a set of benevolent facial features, and his eyes were as blue as the sea, while his aura was as vast as the ocean, and even from this far away, Han Li still couldn't help but be alarmed by the man's formidable aura. The dozen or so figures behind Luo Qinghai all appeared to have been very formidable as well. One of them appeared to have been in his early 20s, and he had a very effeminate appearance with skin that was even fairer than that of a young maiden. If it weren't for the fact that his chest was completely flat, he could have easily been mistaken for a woman. Even though he was also wearing a blue robe, unlike everyone else in the ground, there were golden waves embroidered onto his collar and sleeves, making his attire more similar in appearance to Luo Qinghai's. "Welcome, Palace Master Luo. Forgive me for not coming out to welcome you sooner," Aoyang Qiushan said as he rose to his feet and cupped his fist in a salute, while all of the other Dao Lords and Deputy Dao Lords stood up as well. It's a very rare occasion that fellow Taoist Bailey comes out of seclusion, and he always has very unique insights on the 5 Decays. All of his preaching ceremonies are extremely prestigious events in our northern glacial immortal realm, so I certainly couldn't miss it, Luo Qinghai replied with a smile. Luo Qinghai and Aoyang Qiushan made some small talk, and instead of descending onto the preaching platform like everyone else, Luo Qinghai remained in the air atop his giant blue flower, hovering at the same height as the preaching platform. Not long after the arrival of the vast Flow Palace, a silver chariot that was drawn by 8 silver-scaled dragon horses came flying in from afar. There were around 7 or 8 people on the carriage, and it remained hovering in midair on the other side of the platform. "The northern glacial immortal region has come to attend the ceremony," a beautiful woman on the carriage declared. "This is truly an honor, Deputy Palace Master Zhu Weiying," Aoyang Qiushan greeted as he rose to his feet, but it was clear that he wasn't particularly fond of the new arrivals. The other golden immortal Dao Lords also seemed to have been rather disdainful of everyone from the Immortal Palace, merely taking a glance at them before looking away. The cultivators of the Immortal Palace didn't appear to have been bothered by this, and they extended a greeting toward Luo Qinghai before hovering in the air on the other side of the preaching platform. Following the arrival of the other 2 leading powers of the northern glacial immortal region, there were no further new arrivals. Another 15 minutes or so passed by, and Aoyang Qiushan spoke to several of the Dao Lords beside him briefly, then rose his feet and swept his gaze across the vast crowds of people gathered around the plaza as he declared, "It's time. Welcome, Dao Lord Bailey." His voice wasn't very loud, but it was extremely clear, as if he were speaking right beside everyone on the plaza. In the next instant, everyone rose to their feet, including those on the platform. "Welcome, Dao Lord Bailey." All of the elders and disciples of the Blaze Dragon Dao yelled in unison, causing the entire plaza to buzz and tremble. In the next instant, layers of strange ripples suddenly began to appear in the sky, and a crimson fireball slowly emerged, then turned from red to golden in color, glowing as radiantly as the sun. At the same time, a burst of enormous spiritual pressure erupted out of the ball of fire, and the entirety of the white jade peak instantly fell completely silent. Immediately thereafter, a humanoid figure stepped out of the ball of fire and onto the tall platform. The man appeared to have been no more than 30 to 40 years of age, and his skin was slightly red in coloration and glowing brightly like a piece of flawless crimson jade. He stood tall and proud with an authoritative look on his face, and he had a head of long crimson hair that was arranged inside a gold mesh crown. He was also dressed in a fiery red robe that was riddled with draconic embroidery, and it was none other than the #1 Dao Lords of the Blaze Dragon Dao, the man who was said to have only been 1 step away from the high zenith stage, Bailey Yan. "Brother Luo, if I recall correctly, it's been over 100,000 years since we last met in the battle in the hidden Azure Sea," Bailey Yan said with a smile as he cast his gaze toward the vast Flow Palace camp. "If you hadn't gone into seclusion so quickly, the 2 of us could have had plenty of time to meet and chat," Luo Qinghai jibed. "You're here as well, Deputy Palace Master Zhu Weiying," Bailey Yan greeted as he turned to the Immortal Palace camp. "You're looking as handsome as ever, Dao Lord Bailey. Now that you've come out of seclusion, I'm sure you're even closer to the high zenith stage. Allow me to offer you my congratulations in advance." The woman by the name of Zhu Wang replied with a nod. "I'm afraid your congratulations may be premature, fellow Taoist Zhu Wang. If the high zenith stage were that easy to reach, then I wouldn't have gone to the trouble of going into seclusion so many times." Bailey Yan chuckled, while Zhu Wang merely smiled in response. "I'm very honored to be hosting all of you here today. During this ceremony, I'm going to be sharing my cultivation experiences and insights in the hope that I can help you all further your own cultivation." He swept his gaze calmly across the crowd gathered all over the white jade peak as he spoke, much like an emperor inspecting his own empire, giving off an unmatched sense of majesty and regal authority. After that, he turned around and flew onto the platform, taking a seat with his legs crossed behind the purple table at its center. The dozens of Blaze Dragon Dao lords and deputy lords, and the cultivators from the Blaze Dragon Dao's allied sects were seated on either side of him, making him resemble a bright moon surrounded by stars. The sound of a loud gong being struck 3 times in succession rang out, and a peculiar burst of fluctuations instantly spread over the entire mountain range. Han Li was immediately instilled with a sense of calmness upon hearing this sound, and what little remained of the background noise quickly died down to result in complete silence. Bailey Yan cast his gaze directly forward as he began to speak, and his voice was surprisingly smooth and mellow. His voice didn't appear to have been remarkable in any way, and those who were further away from him were initially struggling to hear him. But it didn't take long before his voice began to reverberate around the entire mountain. His words were echoing incessantly, striking deep into the hearts of the listeners like the tolls of a giant bell, or like the mantric chantings of the Buddha. Everyone was immersed in this unique sound, and as for exactly what Bailey Yan was saying, it was becoming a little indistinct. However, this immersive atmosphere struck everyone with a sense of comfort both in the body and the soul, and many people could feel their magic power circulation becoming a lot smoother, while certain bottlenecks were beginning to loosen. However, most of the people experiencing this were at or below the Grand Ascension stage, while everyone at the true Immortal stage and above weren't benefiting anywhere near as much. As for Han Li, he was able to roughly understand what was being preached, but he was not experiencing any profound sensation like everyone else. The reason for this was his enormous spiritual sense, which was even more formidable than that of the average golden immortal. As a result of this, the preaching of a late golden immortal stage Tao Lord wasn't enough to place him into an entranced state of immersion. Furthermore, the preaching of the portly monk on the wall of light manifested by the eye of truth and the heaven-controlling vial was far more profound, and in comparison, Han Li was left feeling a little disappointed. However, he didn't outwardly express his disappointment, merely sitting on his cushion with his legs crossed and meditating with his eyes closed. After all, this was still the preaching of someone on the verge of reaching the high zenith stage, so it was still going to be somewhat beneficial to him. As time passed, noon quickly arrived, and Bailey Yan's voice was still reverberating across the entire mountain. In fact, it was audible even in White Jade City, and everyone in the city had stopped to listen, making the usually lively and bustling city uncharacteristically quiet. Among the 5 decays, true immortals must face 3 without fail, and those trials will either lead to one's demise or rebirth. Only by cultivating arduously can one hope to. At this point in Bailey Yan's preaching, all of the true immortals on the platform were leaning forward slightly, listening intently with focused looks on their faces. Even the golden immortals present had sat up a little straighter to listen to what he had to say. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly, and a hint of befuddlement appeared in his eyes. He turned to look at Qi Liang, to find that he was just focusing just as intently as all of the other true immortals, seemingly latching onto Bailey Yan's every word. After a brief moment of hesitation, Han Li took advantage of a pause in Bailey Yan's preaching to raise a question to Qi Liang through voice transmission. "Fellow Taoist Qi, may I ask what these 3 decays and 5 decays are?" Qi Liang immediately turned to him with an incredulous expression. "You're unaware of the 3 decays of the true immortal stage." "Please enlighten me, Brother Qi," Han Li said. "In the eyes of cultivators at or below the Grand Ascension stage, true immortals have already reached the end point of cultivation and have ascended to the highest of heights. But as we all know, the true immortal stage is only the first step through the door of immortality, and in reality, there are still far loftier heights to be conquered. While it's true that we possess limitless lifespans, we are not actually truly immortal, and the reason for that is precisely the tribulation of the 3 decays." Qi Liang explained to Han Li through voice transmission, while also listening to Bailey Yan's preaching. "Oh, are the 3 decays similar in nature to the ascension tribulation that Grand Ascension cultivators must transcend? And how do we transcend them?" Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. "The 3 decays are referred to as tribulations, but they have nothing to do with the ascension tribulation. Instead, they describe the 3 crises that all true immortal cultivators will face during the course of their cultivation. The first of those is immortal decay, which results in one's immortal spiritual power seeping away for no discernible reason, thereby damaging one's cultivation base until they fall out of the true immortal stage altogether. The second decay is bodily decay, which results in the gradual weakening of one's body until it's no longer able to hold immortal spiritual power, thereby resulting in the body's detonation. The third decay is acupoint decay, and it's related to one's immortal acupoints. There are many ways to contend against these 3 tribulations, but their effects vary from person to person. However, one universal way to ward off the decays that works for everyone is to make significant progress in a certain law, Qi Liang explained. "I see. No wonder all true immortal cultivators are so desperate to master law powers. Aside from enhancing their own powers, I presume the more urgent priority is actually to combat the 3 decays. When will the 3 decays happen? Or do certain conditions need to be met for them to arise?" Han Li asked. His expression remained unchanged, but internally he was feeling quite shocked. Perhaps it was due to his prior bout of amnesia, but he wasn't aware of this at all, and only after hearing this explanation from Qi Liang did he come to realize that even true immortal cultivators couldn't just be content and rest on their laurels. The timing of the first 2 decay tribulations is completely down to the will of the heavens. Some are fortunate enough to avoid them for millions of years, while others could encounter them in less than 100,000 years. I'm sure you still recall Elder Fang Zhuan of the Merit Conveyance Palace, right? He was once a mid-true immortal cultivator and was only 1 step away from opening up 24 immortal acupoints, but he was blighted by immortal decay and forced all the way back down to the Grand Ascension stage, Qi Liang revealed. "Does that mean that if one progresses sufficiently quickly in their cultivation and reaches the golden immortal stage in a very short time, then they'll be able to avoid those 2 decays?" Han Li asked. "That is indeed true. If someone can reach the golden immortal stage within 10,000 years, then the chances of them being struck by those 2 types of decay are naturally extremely slim. But how many people in the immortal realm are capable of accomplishing such a feat? It's already extremely remarkable for someone to reach the mid-true immortal stage in just 10,000 years. On top of that, even if a true immortal manages to avoid the first 2 decays, if they want to reach the golden immortal stage, then they'll have no choice but to face the 3rd decay," Qi Liang said with a wry smile. "Why is that?" Han Li asked. All I know is that all those attempting breakthroughs to the golden immortal stage will inevitably have to undergo the third decay, and that it's no less damning than the first two decays. That's why there are so few golden immortal cultivators. As for exactly why this is, that's beyond my knowledge, Qi Liang replied. I heard Tao Lord Bailey mention just now that there are 5 decays. What are the other 2? Han Li asked. It's said that after becoming a golden immortal, one will face 2 more decays to amount to a total of 5. As for exactly what those 2 decays are, I'm not sure. In any case, the path of cultivation is truly one that is fraught with. Before Qi Liang had a chance to finish his sentence, 8 of the 12 Blaze Dragon Dao lords suddenly sprang up from their cushions before sweeping their sleeves through the air. The sound of clanging chains interrupted the peace and quiet as the 8 Dao lords, led by Ouyang Qiushan, released 8 golden chains out of their sleeves. Each chain was around the same thickness as a child's arm, and they were riddled with shimmering golden runes as they flashed through the air like a nest of spirit snakes. The chains were aimed directly at Bailey Yan, whose expression remained unchanged, but his preaching had drawn to an abrupt halt. All of a sudden, a burst of crimson light rose up from the ground all around him, enveloping his body from all directions like a fiery red light barrier. The chains scraped against the exterior of the light barrier, raising trails of sparks as they did so, but they were unable to get any closer to Bailey Yan's body. At the same time, Bailey Yan stomped a foot down onto the ground, and a burst of crimson light erupted beneath his foot. The entire white jade platform also shuddered violently, yet right as he was about to launch himself up into the heavens, the 8 Dao lords hurriedly each made a hand seal, upon which the golden chains began to glow brightly while constricting tightly to keep Bailey Yan and the crimson light barrier firmly in place. As a result, Bailey Yan was forced back down onto the platform. A burst of crimson light emerged on his hands as he grabbed toward the surrounding golden chains, only for countless arcs of golden lightning to erupt out of the chains before surging along his arms. Bailey Yan felt a numbing sensation shoot through his arms, and he temporarily lost all feeling in them. At the same time, the arcs of lightning that were springing out of the golden chains had intertwined to form a square golden cage that trapped him within. Even though Bailey Yan was able to immediately regain use of his arms, due to that split second of delay, it had become far more difficult for him to try and break free. At this moment, every single golden pillar in the golden cage around him was flashing with lightning, and layers of scale patterns and antiquated runes had appeared on their surface, giving off clear law fluctuations. These 8 golden chains were clearly a set of high-grade immortal treasures that had been prepared specifically to deal with Bailey Yan. All of this had happened in the blink of an eye, unfolding so quickly and abruptly that none of the tens of thousands of cultivators around the plaza had even registered what had just happened. The 36 deputy Dao lords were greatly alarmed to see this, and all of them began to exchange bewildered glances. It was clear that they hadn't been tipped off in advance at all. On the other side, Yu Yangzi and the others were also very much taken aback by this turn of events, and all of them rose to their feet. Some of them wanted to ask what was happening, but the atmosphere in the air was rather peculiar, so they ultimately decided to hold their tongues. Just like everyone else, Han Li was watching the unfolding situation with a perplexed look on his face. "What's going on?" Qi Liang asked with tightly furrowed brows. On the white jade platform, Taoist Hu Yan stepped forward with a furious expression, only for 2 other Dao lords to immediately get in his way. "What are you all doing? Are you betraying the sect?" Taoist Hu Yan asked in a furious voice. A hint of guilt flashed through the faces of all of the Dao lords who had taken action, but none of them said anything, and the 2 Dao lords standing in Taoist Hu Yan's way displayed no intention of backing down. An alarmed and furious look had also appeared on Yun Nai's face, and she had distanced herself slightly from the Tao lords beside her, unsure of who she could trust. Given the current situation, it appeared that she and Taoist Hu Yan were the only ones who had been kept in the dark. Inside the cage, Bailey Yan slowly swept his gaze across everyone around him, and a burst of crimson light began to emerge on his arms. A burst of scorching flames then erupted out of his arms to envelop the surrounding golden chains, and under the illumination of the flames, his already smooth and pristine skin was made to appear like crimson jade. This golden scale dragon locking formation won't be able to trap me for long, so if you have anything else to throw at me, you better do it now, Bailey Yan said in a cold voice. However, none of the Tao lords remained silent, and it was as if they had agreed in advance not to respond to anything that Bailey Yan said. Up to this point, all of the Blaze Dragon Tao disciples outside the plaza still had no idea what was happening, and they could only watch as the situation unfolded. As for the elders from other sects who had come to attend the ceremony, they were also oblivious to what had happened, but they could sense that this was no laughing matter, and all of them remained seated, not daring to make any sudden moves. Atop the giant blue flower that was hovering in the sky next to the white jade platform, Luo Qinghai had already risen to his feet from his golden throne, and he was watching the scenes unfolding on the platform with his brows tightly furrowed. The effeminate young man behind him approached him, then said, "Palace Master, should we? There's no hurry, let's watch the situation unfold first. If this is an internal affair of the Blaze Dragon Tao, then it would be best for us not to get involved," Luo Qinghai said with a shake of his head. Right at this moment, his expression suddenly changed slightly as he cast his gaze upward. As it turned out, a golden line that was several thousand feet in length had suddenly appeared high up in the sky, and it swelled rapidly into a vast expanse of blinding golden light, from within which a group of 20 to 30 figures emerged. They were led by a tall man with a square face and a thin and long silver mustache. The man was wearing a pristine white robe with golden cloud patterns embroidered upon it, and those patterns were giving off dazzling spiritual light, indicating that this was no ordinary robe. Hovering in the air behind him were 20 to 30 men and women, most of whom were also wearing white robes, with only very few of them dressed in different attire. However, one thing that was common to all of them was their auras were extremely formidable, and their collective spiritual pressure struck one with a crushing sense of asphyxiation. All of the cultivators of the Blaze Dragon Tao were already bewildered by everything that they were seeing, and this certainly didn't help to settle their nerves. As soon as the man with the silver mustache appeared, the expressions of everyone on the white jade platform instantly changed drastically, with the exception of the 10 Tao lords. As for all of the elders and disciples situated on the plaza and the surrounding stone steps, all of them were rather dazed and confused, clearly having no idea of what this group of white-robed figures were going to do. Han Li's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, and his mind was racing. He didn't know who these people were, but he could tell that the man with the silver mustache was definitely no ordinary cultivator, and his powers most likely weren't inferior to Bailey Yan's. As for why the 10 Tao lords had suddenly decided to betray Bailey Yan, that most likely had everything to do with this man, but he couldn't figure out what the motive of Aoyang Qiushan and the others was. Even though Bailey Yan was the Blaze Dragon Tao's first Tao lord and its most powerful cultivator, he was constantly in seclusion and barely oversaw any matters in the Blaze Dragon Tao at all, so those who actually controlled the sect and benefited most from its resources were the other Tao lords. There was no conflict of interest between the parties, and in fact, the Tao lords benefited from the protection that Bailey Yan provided to the sect. While it appeared that he had been trapped for now, he hadn't been injured at all, so given sufficient time, there was a very good chance that he would be able to break free from hid bindings. And once that happened, even the 10 Tao Lords combined definitely wouldn't have been a match for him. However, the situation had taken a complete turn with the arrival of these white-robed figures, and Han Li could detect the minute changes in the expressions of Aoyang Qiushan and the others. However, ultimately, none of this had anything to do with him, and he certainly didn't want to be swept up in this mess. Having said that, he couldn't afford to act reckless given the current circumstances, so he would have to wait and see. As these thoughts were flashing through his mind, he was sweeping his gaze across the people in the sky, trying to see if he could gather any more visual information about them. However, right as his gaze fell upon a young man holding a folding fan standing among the people behind the man with the silver mustache, his mind was suddenly struck by a burst of sharp pain. He couldn't help lower his head while massaging his own temples to try and alleviate the pain. The young man was very handsome and was wearing a tight-fitting silver robe with intricate designs of flora and fauna embroidered upon it. He was holding a white jade folding fan with an amicable smile on his face. He casually looked down from above, sweeping his gaze over the crowd down below before directing his gaze to the white jade platform. After massaging his own temples for a while, Han Li seemed to have regained his composure somewhat, but there was a look of bewilderment in his eyes. Right at this moment, Zhu Wang suddenly extended a respectful curtsy toward the man with the silver mustache as she greeted. Zhu Wang pays her respects to the palace master. Everyone erupted into chatter upon hearing this. Zhu Wang was the deputy palace master of the northern glacial Immortal region, so the man that she was referring to as palace master naturally had to have been Xiao Jinhen, the current palace master of the northern glacial Immortal region. Xiao Jinhen gave her a slight nod, then turned his attention to the golden cage down below, where his gaze just so happened to Bailey Yan's. A mocking sneer appeared on his face, while a cold look flashed through Bailey Yan's eyes. On the platform, Yu Yangzi and Layman Mo exchanged a glance, and both of them could see their own apprehension mirrored in one another's eyes. Both of them slowly began to move away from the center of the platform, for fear of getting swept up in whatever was about to come. Everyone else at the center of the platform also followed suit to vacate the entire area. Prior to this, I saw it as inappropriate for me to get involved in this matter as I thought it was an internal affair of the Blaze Dragon Dao, but it seems like the northern glacial Immortal region is now getting involved. I believe you owe everyone an explanation for this, Palace Master Xiao, Luo Qinghai declared. Bailey Yan is a wanted fugitive of the Reincarnation Palace being hunted by the Heavenly Court, and I've been ordered to apprehend him. Is that enough of an explanation for you, fellow Taoist Luo? Xiao Jinhen replied in a cold voice. He swept a hand through the air as he spoke, and a streak of golden light that contained a golden scroll flew through the air. The scroll then unfurled itself in a flash to reveal a passage of golden text, and sure enough, it was a wanted notice directed at Bailey Yan. All of the true immortals of the Blaze Dragon Dao were rather befuddled by the mention of the Reincarnation Palace, clearly having no idea of what that was supposed to have been. Even Yu Yangzi was rather puzzled by what he was hearing, while only Layman Mo and Luo Qinghai seemed to have been aware of what was being discussed. The former apologized to Taoist Hu Yan through voice transmission, then flew out of the white jade platform. At the same time, he swept a sleeve through the air to summon that giant ink stone before flying away atop the treasure, unwilling to stay for even a moment longer. As for Luo Qinghai, his brows furrowed even tighter upon seeing this, and he took a long glance at Bailey Yan as he fell completely silent, but didn't appear to have had any plans of leaving right away. Yu Yangzi and the others certainly weren't fools either, and they immediately fled into the distance, knowing that this wasn't something that was wise for them to get involved in. Only a few of them were unable to suppress their curiosity, and only flew several hundred kilometers before stopping and turning around again to observe the unfolding situation from afar. And none of the cultivators from the northern glacial Immortal region raised any objections to this. Bailey Yan withdrew his gaze, then turned to the Tao lords who had trapped him as he asked, "Are all of you going to betray me?" Crimson flames were surging over his body, releasing waves of astonishing heat that were constantly scorching the golden chains, but the chains remained completely still and weren't showing any signs of melting. However, it was clearly not an easy task for Aoyang Qiushan and the others to keep the chains in place, as evidenced by the sheens of sweat that had appeared on their foreheads. None of them dared to relax in the slightest as they maintained their hand seals, doing everything in their power to stabilize the golden chains. Fellow Taoist Bailey, our Blaze Dragon Tao is indeed quite a formidable sect, but we can't contend against the Immortal Palace. They have the backing of the Heavenly Court. What do we have? We can't just stand by and watch as the entire Blaze Dragon Tao is destroyed with you, Aoyang Qiushan sighed. What about all of you? Do you share the same opinion? Bailey Yan asked as he turned to the 36 deputy Tao lords behind him, all of which immediately lowered their heads, unwilling to meet his gaze. Meanwhile, all of the people on the stone staircase around the platform had been placed in a very awkward situation. No matter how oblivious they were to the nature of the situation, at this point, it was clear that something was very wrong here. Many of the people present were considering leaving the White Jade Peak. After all, they certainly didn't want to get swept up in a battle between golden immortals. As for the cultivators of the Immortal Palace, they appeared to have been quite calm and collected, but they were constantly watching the people down below with alert looks in their eyes. Han Li was looking up at the cultivators of the Immortal Palace, just like many of the people around him, and it was unclear what he was thinking. At this point, Qi Liang had also fallen silent. It was clear that this was not a situation that a true, immortal stage elder like him could play any meaningful role in. All of a sudden, the entire platform had become completely silent, and the atmosphere had become extremely tense. Aoyang Qiushan, what are you waiting for? Zhao Jinhen suddenly urged in an authoritative voice. Aoyang Qiushan and the others offered no response, but all of them immediately sprang into action, making a string of hand seals with one hand while holding onto golden chains with the other. A burst of formidable energy fluctuations erupted out of their bodies, spreading through the entire surrounding space in a radius of dozens of kilometers. All of the space within this area was visibly rippling, causing the scene to become rather blurry and unclear. Within the rippling space, the surface of the golden cage was flashing incessantly with golden light. At the same time, thin golden threads were emerging from the cage, piercing toward Bailey Yan like a mass of countless feelers. Right at this moment, a huge snow lotus flower projection abruptly appeared amid a flash of white light behind one of the chain-wielding Tao lords. Aoyang Qiushan spotted this out of the corner of his eye, and he immediately yelled out in alarm, "Yun Nai, stop!" As soon as his voice trailed off, a pristine white hand that was as translucent as jade abruptly extended out of the lotus flower projection before striking the Tao Lord on the back. There was a translucent bead situated at the center of the palm, and in the instant that it came into contact with the Tao Lord's back, it abruptly exploded, releasing a burst of dazzling white light alongside gusts of ferocious wind. The Tao Lord in question was focusing most of his attention on the chain in his hand, and everyone else was primarily keeping an eye on Taoist Hu Yan, so no one had anticipated that Yun Nai would suddenly strike. Thus, the Tao Lord was caught completely off guard, and he didn't have time to summon any treasures, so he could only release a layer of protective spiritual light before the palm struck him on the back. A loud thump rang out as the spiritual light around the Tao Lord's body was dispelled, and he immediately threw up a mouthful of blood as he was launched forward like a kite with a snapped string, crashing into the golden cage around Bailey Yan. He was still gripping tightly onto the golden chain with one hand, but the hand seal he was making with his other hand had already unraveled. In the next instant, the surface of the golden cage shuddered, and Bailey Yan erupted into raucous laughter as two beams of crimson light erupted out of his eyes. At the same time, his aura also swelled drastically. High up in the sky, Xiao Jinhen gave a cold harumph upon seeing this, then swept a sleeve through the air to release a shimmering golden rune, which flew directly toward the golden cage like an arrow while giving off bursts of law fluctuations. Taoist Huyan immediately sprang into action as well upon seeing this, raising a hand to release an azure ball that was riddled with runes. At the same time, he bit through the tip of his own tongue before spitting out a mouthful of blood essence. Almost at the exact same moment, the Tao Lord standing in his way raised both hands up into the air, releasing a golden wheel that erupted into the heavens, hurtling directly toward the azure ball, while other Tao Lord outside of the 8 that were maintaining the golden cage flew toward Yun Nai. Taoist Huyen quickly made a hand seal, and fueled by his blood essence, a series of golden veins instantly lit up on the azure ball. Immediately thereafter, it vanished into thin air in a flash, leaving the golden wheel far behind. In the next instant, the azure ball reappeared near the golden rune, and at the same time, the golden veins on its surface reached the peak of their brightness, following which the azure ball exploded, releasing a vast cloud of azure mist that swept through the air in all directions with tremendous force. Before the cloud of azure mist had a chance to disperse, a streak of golden light suddenly flashed past beneath it, and the golden rune continued to fly toward the cave, completely unscathed. Right as it was about to land upon the golden cage, a streak of transparent swordlight that was invisible to the naked eye struck the golden rune with unerring accuracy like a stream of water. The streak of swordlight dissipated upon making contact with the golden rune, but it was able to knock the rune off its original path. It was still descending from above, but its trajectory was no longer one that could allow it to land on the cage. All of this sounded like a long process, but in reality, it had all taken place in the blink of an eye. The entire scene was completely silent. Not only were the low-grade cultivators on the plaza stunned beyond belief, all of the Blaze Dragon Dao cultivators situated on the stone steps were also astonished by what they were seeing. A hint of blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he was able to see everything that had just taken place. The golden rune released by Xiao Jinhen was very elusive, able to completely ignore that attack from Taoist Huyan, but it was nullified by the streak of transparent swordlight released by Luo Qinghai. Officially speaking, the Immortal Palace was the dominant power in the northern glacial Immortal region, but it clearly had some differences with the vast Flow Palace. At the very least, Luo Qinghai didn't seem to have been a fan of Xiao Jinhen. High up in the sky, Xiao Jinhen took a cold glance at Luo Qinghai, and his expression remained unchanged as he swooped down directly toward the white jade platform from above. Meanwhile, Luo Qinghai slowly withdrew his right hand, which was concealed up his sleeve, then turned around and sat back down onto his golden throne. The giant blue flower that he was situated on remained hovering in the sky, and he still wasn't displaying any intention of departing. The dozen or so blue-robed cultivators standing on the giant flower with him also appeared to have been just as calm and collected as he was. Before Xiao Jinhen was able to descend upon the white jade platform, a draconic roar abruptly rang out, and scorching flames erupted out of Bailey Yan's eyes as he curled his fingers up into the claws, then abruptly lashed out at the golden cage before him. Crimson flames rose up from his claws, then rose up to form a peculiar draconic head, which blasted a pillar of fire out of its mouth to strike a certain part of the golden cage. An earth-shattering boom rang out, as one of the pillars of the golden cage was swallowed up by the draconic head's cavernous mouth. Golden runes were constantly flying out of the scorching flames, while the pillar was warping and twisting until it finally snapped. The destruction of that one pillar caused a chain reaction, and all of the other golden pillars quickly shattered one after another, causing the entire golden cage to collapse. A burst of dazzling golden light erupted forth on the white jade platform, following which several dozen draconic head projections flew in all directions, releasing a tremendously powerful aura as they did so. Specks of golden light arose in the air, and immediately thereafter, the light barrier that enshrouded the entire mountain was completely destroyed amid a resounding boom. Half of the white jade platform down below was also destroyed, and the 8 Tao lords who were previously holding the golden cage together hurriedly summoned protective treasures as a defensive measure, but they were still sent flying back involuntarily. Several of them were struck by the draconic head projections, and the light barriers formed by their protective treasures were instantly destroyed, causing them to tumble down from the platform while throwing up large mouthfuls of blood. Meanwhile, Taoist Hu Yan arrived by Yun Nai's side in a flash, warding off several oncoming draconic head projections while sweeping her down from the white jade platform with him. Even though there were around a dozen Tao lords acting as a buffer, the 36 deputy Tao lords were still sent flying in all directions from the shockwaves of the explosion that had just taken place, but they took advantage of this to fly further away. All of the cultivators on the stone steps also dispersed in a panic, flying away in all directions as quickly as they could. No one wanted to be the first person to try and flee for fear of being struck down by the Immortal Palace's cultivators. But now that the entire scene had erupted into complete pandemonium, an opportunity had arisen for everyone to get away. Han Li and Qi Liang also fled the scene in a certain direction with the crowd. Countless loose rocks were exploding in all directions, much to the alarm of the hundreds of thousands of low-grade cultivators gathered around the plaza, and they also hurriedly summoned their protective treasures while fleeing as quickly as they could. All of a sudden, countless streaks of light of different colors were flying in all directions from the white jade peak, presenting a marvelous spectacle to behold. In the sky above, Luo Qinghai made a hand seal to conjure up a blue water barrier that encompassed the entire giant blue flower, and the water barrier merely shuddered momentarily in the face of the shockwaves before settling down again. On the other side, Deputy Palace Master Zhu Weiying of the Immortal Palace swept a sleeve through the air to conjure up a semi-transparent protective barrier around the silver chariot, then cast her gaze toward Luo Qinghai. However, Luo Qinghai appeared to have been completely oblivious to her scrutiny, looking as calm and collected as ever. As for Zhao Jinhen, he paid no heed to the oncoming shockwaves at all, and he wasn't slowing down in the slightest as he continued to swoop down from above. Another loud explosion rang out as a vast expanse of glacial qi erupted out of Zhao Jinhen's body, and a giant white mountain of ice appeared in the sky amid a cloud of white mist, then crashed down onto the white jade platform with devastating might. Half of the platform had already collapsed, and under the tremendous weight and momentum of the mountain of ice, the rest of the platform also fell away without being able to offer much resistance. Meanwhile, Han Li had already flown out of the white jade peak and was observing the unfolding scene from afar. Loose rocks and chunks of ice had already piled up into a huge mountain in that direction, presenting a chaotic sight to behold. Right at this moment, burst of crimson light suddenly appeared beneath the rubble, and immediately thereafter, a sharp clang rang out as a pillar of crimson flames that was around as thick as an adult human arm erupted directly upward from the wreckage before sweeping vertically over the area to slice the mountain of ice and rocks in half down the middle. A loud roar then rang out as Bailey Yen flew out of the mountain of ice with crimson flames surging all of his body, and he was flying directly toward Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. With a flick of his wrist, Zhao Jinhen summoned a translucent longsword, around which was a band of white mist that resembled a coiled snake, and he slashed the sword in Bailey Yan's direction. The cloud up above churned violently as hundreds of giant white pythons formed by glacial chi twisted and writhed, descending upon Bailey Yan like a flight of formidable dragons. Bailey Yan let loose another thunderous roar, and he lashed out with a longsword that was enveloped in crimson flames, slashing it horizontally through the air. A scorching aura swept through the air, as hundreds of giant pillars of flames emerged out of thin air to combat the glacial pythons. A burst of rumbling akin to a dull thunderclap rang out in the sky as snow and ice clashed with devastating force, and each side was taking up half of the sky. Meanwhile, the plaza had already erupted into complete chaos. High up in the sky, Zhu Wang suddenly asked in an accusatory voice, "Are you trying to stand against our immortal palace master Mo?" Only then did Luo Qinghai finally turn to Zhu Wang as he replied in a casual voice, "What are you talking about, celestial maiden Zhu? I'm only spectating with a few of my disciples, and I don't wish to play any part in the conflict between your immortal palace and the blaze dragon Dao." Zhu Wang offered no response to this, instead turning to a pair of cultivators beside her as she instructed, "Lu Yue, Dong Jai, take everyone and go and keep an eye on Taoist Hu Yan." The two cultivators immediately heeded the order, setting off with all of the other cultivators situated on the chariot. "I'll be going ahead, Palace Master Luo," Zhu Wang said as she stowed the silver chariot away, before flying off in pursuit of Zhao Jinhen and Bailey Yan as a streak of white light. At this point, the plaza around the white Jade Peak was already severely ravaged and littered with lifeless bodies. Taoist Hu Yan was hovering in midair with Yun Nai beside him, and both of them were watching the battle taking place between Bailey Yan and Zhao Jinhen. Right at this moment, a huge black axe projection descended out of the sky, releasing a burst of tremendous suction force that caused the surrounding space to twist and warp. Taoist Hu Yan seemed to have already anticipated this as he took a step forward and dragged Yun Nai closer to his side, evading the attack with ease. After missing its target, the giant axe projection crashed down onto the ground with an earth-shattering boom, slicing a massive, bottomless trench that was over 10,000 feet in length into the ground on the plaza. Many of the low-grade cultivators who hadn't been able to get away yet were swept up by the attack, perishing on the spot before they even had a chance to cry out. Immediately thereafter, the man by the name of Dong Jai raised his enormous mountain-splitting axe with both hands before swinging it down once again. At the same time, the 7 immortal palace cultivators, led by Dong Jai, suddenly appeared around the plaza to surround Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. Earlier, they had somehow managed to conceal their cultivation bases, and at this moment, all of them were giving off golden, immortal stage spiritual pressure. In particular, Lu Yue and Dong Jai's auras indicated that they were at the mid-golden immortal stage. They held no regard for the safety of the people who still hadn't yet managed to escape from the plaza, and they summoned a whole host of formidable treasures to rain down a ferocious barrage of attacks. The entire space was trembling violently as countless anguished cries rang out from all directions, with deaths and casualties piling up by the second. A complex look appeared on Aoyang Qiushan's face as he took a glance at the chaotic scene unfolding on the plaza, and he turned to the Tao lords beside him as he instructed, "Evacuate our sect's disciples and try to save as many of them as possible." Even though they had been struck by the shockwaves from when Bailey Yan broke free from the cage, they remained largely unscathed, and they immediately dispersed, calling upon some of the deputy Tao lords and true immortal stage elders who were still on the scene. And together, they began evacuating the Blaze Dragon Tao's low-grade disciples from around the plaza in batches. At the center of the plaza, Yun Nai conjured up her snow lotus flower projection to encompass both herself and Taoist Hu Yan. Countless attacks were raining down incessantly upon the snow lotus flower projection, and its petals were constantly trembling, looking as if they weren't going to be able to hold up for much longer. Meanwhile, Taoist Hu Yan summoned a black pagoda treasure, then tapped a finger against it, instantly conjuring up a black pagoda projection that encompassed the snow lotus flower projection around them. A string of loud clangs rang out as the oncoming attack struck the pagoda projection, while Taoist Hu Yan turned to Yun Nai with a pained look in his eyes. "I have my reasons for why I must follow Tao Lord Bailey, and that's why I helped him, but you don't know anything about that, and you could have easily chosen to save yourself. So why have you gotten yourself involved in this mess?" A faint smile appeared on Yun Nai's face upon hearing this, and she said, "Is it because of the Reincarnation Palace? While it's true that I don't know about all of that, that's not important. As long as I can be with you, that's enough. Thankfully, Sai Yuan is with Feng Yi, so I don't have to worry about her." Taoist Hu Yan burst into laughter upon hearing this. "All right, in that case, let's take on these Immortal Palace small fry together." As soon as his voice trailed off, an earth-shattering boom rang out from above, and a golden sword projection came plunging straight down from the heavens to strike the black pagoda projection, shattering the roof of the pagoda projection while also causing the entire projection to shudder violently. At the same time, a crack also appeared on the miniature pagoda treasure in Taoist Hu Yan's hand. He looked up into the sky to find Lu Yue hovering up above with golden light swirling around his body, and there were several massive sword projections around him that were constantly swinging down upon the black pagoda projection. Meanwhile, Dong Jai and the other Immortal Palace cultivators were also constantly raining attacks down upon the black pagoda projection, and they were being joined by around a dozen of the Immortal Palace cultivators that had accompanied Xiao Jinhin here. They were led by a woman in a pink palace dress who was also a mid-golden immortal cultivator. Taoist Hu Yan gave a cold harumph upon seeing this, then patted his own waist, and the silver gourd strapped to his belt immediately flew out of the snow lotus flower projection, before swelling rapidly to the size of a house as it hovered in midair. Immediately thereafter, Taoist Hu Yan began to chant an incantation, and the spirit patterns on the surface of the giant silver gourd began to flash erratically, while a burst of indistinct white light appeared at its opening. A stream of black beans came pouring out of the white light, and in the blink of an eye, the entire sky was filled with black beans that were raining down from the heavens. Even before landing on the ground, the beans warped and elongated, transforming into a series of Tao warriors that were at around 10 feet tall, dressed in black clothes and wielding giant black axes. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of these Tao warriors had taken shape, and they were rushing toward the oncoming Immortal Palace cultivators in a frenzy. Even though most of the Blaze Dragon Tao disciples had already been evacuated from the plaza, it had suddenly become very crowded once again. Dong Jai immediately rushed into the fray, swinging his giant axe as he led the charge into the army of Tao warriors, followed by several other Immortal Palace cultivators. "I knew he would be a pain to deal with. I'll find a way to keep him occupied. All of you go and assist Elder Lu," the woman in the pink palace dress instructed, then sat down in midair with her legs folded over one another in a rather strange posture, following which she conjured up a translucent white gyukin in front of herself. She raised her hands before quickly strumming her fingers over the strings of the gyukin, and a string of crisp notes rang out, immediately following which the chests of a group of Tao warriors several thousand feet away abruptly exploded, rendering them unfit for further battle. She then turned toward another direction before strumming the strings of her gyukin again, and many more Tao warriors immediately fell to the ground. The sound of her gyukin appeared to have been quite pleasant to the ears, but in reality, it was capable of casting one's blood, energy, and magic power into complete disarray, and even the Tao warriors weren't impervious to it. Meanwhile, the dozen or so Immortal Palace cultivators pounced on this opportunity to converge toward Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. Several hundred kilometers away, Han Li and Qi Liang were standing on a mountain summit with several dozen other true Immortal cultivators. Han Li's eyes were flashing with blue light as he observed Taoist Hu Yan, then shook his head with a forlorn expression. During the past few centuries that he had spent in the Blaze Dragon Tao, Taoist Hu Yan was the one who had offered him the most assistance, and their relationship had always been quite cordial, so it was not a good feeling to see him in such a dire situation. However, there was naturally no way that he would try to rush in and save him. In the face of so many golden immortals, his powers were simply insufficient to make any substantial difference, and he would only be giving up his own life for nothing. On top of that, the silver-robed young man that he had noticed earlier was striking him with a strong sense of foreboding, but he couldn't put his finger on exactly why this was the case. Right at this moment, another resounding boom rang out in the sky above the plaza. As it turned out, the silver gourd that Taoist Hu Yan was using to hold all of his Tao warriors had exploded amid a flash of silver light. All of the Tao warriors inside, which totaled in excess of 100,000, had already been released, while the broken gourd transformed into a vast expanse of azure spirit liquid that rained down onto the Tao warriors. As soon as the Tao warriors came into contact with the spirit liquid, bright black light erupted out of their bodies, and they swelled to twice their original size as they charged toward the Immortal Palace cultivators. Unfortunately, in the face of around 24 golden immortals and true immortals, these Tao warriors were simply no match, and they were being cut down in swathes like crops in a field. But fortunately, they were able to keep Dong Jai and the others occupied thanks to their vast numbers. However, with the assistance of the attacks from the gyukin of the woman in the pink palace dress, 3 of them were able to charge into the central area to attack Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai alongside Lu Yue. All of a sudden, Han Li noticed that one of these 3 people was the silver-robed young man that he had felt quite apprehensive about. He was behaving rather strangely in that even though he was also participating in the attack against Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai, he didn't seem to have been very invested, merely wandering around the outskirts of the battlefield and very rarely unleashing any attacks, seemingly only there as a formality. As a result, Han Li was unable to gauge his power or any of his cultivation arts. After instructing all of the other Tao lords to evacuate the Blaze Dragon Tao's low-grade disciples, Yang Qiushan remained standing in midair not far away from the white Jade peak, observing the battle from afar. All of a sudden, a resounding boom rang out as Lu Yue made a hand seal, and a streak of golden swordlight that was over 1,000 feet in length appeared before crashing down upon the black pagoda projection with mountainous force. The projection instantly collapsed before disintegrating into specks of black light, but the power of the streak of golden swordlight was also exhausted, dissipating before it even had a chance to reach the snow lotus flower projection down below. Lu Yue's complexion paled as he stumbled in midair, then hurriedly summoned a pill that he promptly devoured, clearly having been severely taxed by the attack that he had just unleashed. The two Immortal Palace cultivators who were participating in the attack immediately stopped what they were doing before positioning themselves in front of Lu Yue to protect him, while the silver-robed young man continued prowling around the area, unleashing attacks upon the snow lotus flower projection. A series of large cracks had appeared on the black pagoda treasure that Taoist Hu Yan was holding, and even though it hadn't completely shattered, it was clearly no longer fit for use. "How dare you?" Taoist Hu Yan roared in a furious voice as he stowed the black pagoda away, then pulled out his crimson gourd, grabbing onto the rope tied around the tapered section of the gourd with one hand, while making a hand seal with the other before gently patting the gourd. A sharp clang rang out as a crimson longsword was slowly drawn out of the opening of the gourd. "I didn't think that my crimson luan would ever be unsheathed again. Now that it's seeing the light of day again, I suppose I have no choice but to slaughter these small fry." Taoist Hu Yan chuckled as he took a swig of wine, then turned to Yun Nai as if he were asking for her opinion. Yun Nai gave him a warm smile and a nod in response. A solemn look immediately appeared on Taoist Hu Yan's face, and his aura had suddenly become as sharp as the edge of a blade. Immediately thereafter, he shot out of the snow lotus flower projection, hurtling directly toward Lu Yue. A layer of hazy light appeared all around him, and a series of fiery red runes lit up on the longsword in his hand. His robes were flapping audibly in the fierce wind, and his aura had swelled drastically. With the sword in his hand, it was as if he had turned into a completely different person. The two Immortal Palace late true immortal cultivators didn't even get a chance to react before a streak of crimson light flashed past them, and their bodies were sliced into two with stunned looks frozen on their faces. Their nascent souls had only just begun to flee the scene when they abruptly erupted into flames and were incinerated into nothingness in the blink of an eye. The woman in the palace dress immediately strummed the strings of her gyukin upon seeing this, sending a burst of formidable ripples sweeping directly toward him. Yun Nai raised her hands up into the air in response, and a huge flower petal detached itself from her snow lotus flower projection, then rose straight up into the air, clashing with the wave of ripples to keep it at bay. "Your opponent is me," Yun Nai said in a cold voice, and the woman in the palace dress gave her a faint smile before beginning to strum the strings of her gyukin once again. The sound of her gyukin was like a turbulent river that swept toward Yun Nai in waves. Meanwhile, after slaying those two late true immortal cultivators, Taoist Hu Yan slashed his longsword through the air, and a massive fiery luan projection instantly appeared behind Lu Yue. Immediately thereafter, he let loose a loud cry that resembled the call of a phoenix, and the fiery luan projection flew forward with unstoppable might. At the same time, a burst of crimson flames surged out of Taoist Hu Yan's longsword, and in the instant that it caught up to the fiery luan projection, the latter immediately transformed into a massive sea of fire that swept directly toward Lu Yue. In response, Lu Yue raised his sword before slashing it forward, and a burst of dazzling golden light erupted out of the sword before rapidly expanding in midair to form a golden wall to keep the sea of fire at bay. Even though the sea of fire had been stopped in its tracks, it didn't dissipate. Instead, it continued to crash against the golden wall in formidable waves. The wall was trembling violently, and the golden light that it was radiating quickly faded before it was completely overwhelmed by the sea of fire. Taoist Hu Yan held his sword in one hand as he strode over the sea of fire, putting on an extremely graceful and dashing display. Lu Yue harumphed coldly as he raised a hand to release a circular golden shield, while flew into the sea of fire while revolving incessantly. Immediately thereafter, he sprang up and landed on his feet atop the shield, quickly gliding over the sea of fire as he hurtled directly toward Taoist Hu Yan. Their swords clashed amid a resounding clang, and countless sword projections erupted in all directions. While Taoist Hu Yan and Lu Yue were locked in a fierce battle, Yun Nai wasn't doing so well on her end. At this point, most of the petals of the snow lotus flower projection around her had already wilted, giving it a rather bare and broken appearance. She was holding a thin green willow branch in one hand, and with each swing of the branch, thousands of willow leaf-shaped blades of light would be sent sweeping through the air to form a dense net, preventing the woman in the pink palace dress from being able to approach her. However, right at this moment, a burst of azure light suddenly appeared above her, and it transformed into a massive sword that came piercing down at her head in a nasty sneak attack. Yun Nai's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and several flower petals immediately closed around her to form a protective barrier. A loud thump rang out as those flower petals were completely pulverized, and a sword-wielding figure was sent flying back by the resulting shockwaves, hovering in the sky around 1,000 feet away from Yun Nai. "Do you still remember me, Tao Lord Yun?" the figure asked with a cold smile. Yun Nai's complexion was rather pale after withstanding that attack, and she cast her gaze toward the sword-wielding figure clad in azure armor to find that it was none other than Gu Jai. It seemed that in order to exact revenge on Yun Nai, he had refrained from appearing this entire time, and he had only just emerged to unleash that sneak attack. Taoist Hu Yan had already noticed what had just happened, and he immediately switched to a series of different hand seals. The sea of fire beneath him surged toward Lu Yue at his behest, while he descended out of the heavens to land beside Yun Nai. "Are you all right?" he asked with tightly furrowed brows. "I'm fine," Yun Nai replied before summoning a pill and swallowing it. A cold and furious look appeared on Taoist Hu Yan's face, and he turned to Gu Jai with intense killing intent in his eyes. A sense of foreboding welled up in Gu Jai's heart upon seeing this, and he gulped nervously. "I'm going to kill you," Taoist Hu Yan declared in a frosty voice, then sliced his sword across the palm of his own hand, opening up a gash out of which blood flowed onto his crimson Luan sword. Bright crimson light erupted from the sword, and the obscure runes on its surface also lit up. Taoist Hu Yan then flung his sword through the air, and it instantly vanished amid a flash of crimson light. Gu Jai's heart jolted slightly upon seeing this, and he hurriedly conjured up a layer of protective spiritual light while retreating into the distance. However, he had only just made it several thousand feet when a burst of crimson light abruptly appeared behind him, then pierced through the layer of protective spiritual light around him with ease before plunging straight into his body. The clear call of a phoenix rang out as the sword pierced through his back, before emerging out of the front of his chest as a fiery Luan bird. In the instant that the sword pierced through his body, several jets of blood instantly shot out of the hole in Gu Jai's chest, and he let loose an agonized howl as his entire body erupted into flames. After flying out of the front of Gu Jai's chest, the fiery Luan bird immediately swiveled around in midair, swooping down with the aim of piercing through Gu Jai's body again. Enveloped in a layer of crimson flames, Gu Jai let loose a loud roar as he joined his palms in front of his own chest. A burst of green light immediately appeared over his suit of azure armor, and it flowed like water, enveloping the crimson flames around him. The crimson Luan bird struck this layer of azure light with tremendous force, but it immediately sank in as if it had struck a wall of cotton before being repelled back and falling away to the side. Taoist Hu Yan made a beckoning motion, and the fiery Luan bird reverted back into the form of a longsword before returning to his grasp. Immediately thereafter, plumes of white smoke began to rise up from Gu Jai's body, and all of the crimson flames were quickly snuffed out. However, at this point, he had already been completely disfigured from burns. His skin and flesh were charred black and riddled with unsightly gashes that glowing crimson, presenting a ghastly sight much like that of glowing molten lava swimming beneath the parched and cracked earth. All of the Immortal Palace cultivators were greatly startled to see this, and they all turned to Taoist Hu Yan with a hint of wariness in their eyes. However, Gu Jai suddenly began to cackle in an inexplicable fashion, and at the same time, the layer of green light around his body began to slowly converge and envelop his body tightly like a tight-fitting robe, then fused into his body in a flash. Immediately thereafter, all of the burns and gashes on his body began to heal at a rapid rate that was discernible even to the naked eye. Taoist Hu Yan gave a cold harumph upon seeing this, but didn't appear to have been all that surprised. As golden immortals, it was not so easy for one's soul and physical body to be destroyed. Tao Lord Aoyang, the sooner all of this comes to an end, the less destruction the Blaze Dragon Tao will have to endure, Lu Yue said in a cold voice as he turned to Aoyang Qiushan. Aoyang Qiushan hesitated slightly upon hearing this, then rose up into the sky as a streak of azure light, quickly appearing on the plaza in a flash. With his participation, the Tao warriors were cut down at an even faster rate, and it wasn't going to be long before they were entirely wiped out. The 4 Immortal Palace Golden Immortal cultivators were freed up as a result, and they joined forces to set up a lightning formation outside of the Sea of Fire. Dozens of bolts of azure and purple lightning that were as thick as water vats came crashing out of the formation, wiping out even more Tao warriors. As the number of remaining Tao warriors rapidly declined, Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai's situation became more and more perilous. Just like Han Li, complex looks had appeared on the faces of many of the Blaze Dragon Tao cultivators who were watching the unfolding battle, including some Tao lords and deputy Tao lords. In their eyes, even though Bailey Yan very rarely appeared in the sect, the past 8 preaching ceremonies that he had held had benefited a huge number of cultivators, and he was the reason why the Blaze Dragon Tao had been able to remain standing in the northern glacial immortal region to this day, and become a sect that could rank alongside the vast Flow Palace. This was an extremely sinister scheme from the northern glacial immortal region to attack during the preaching ceremony, and Bailey Yan had clearly made an effort to avoid harming the spectators present. Yet the Immortal Palace cultivators hadn't displayed any aversion to collateral damage. What was quite saddening to see was that among the 12 golden immortal stage Tao lords, only Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai dared to stand against the northern glacial immortal region, but it was clear that they were fighting a losing battle. If they were to be defeated, Bailey Yan would be completely on his own, and he would surely be overwhelmed by the Immortal Palace cultivators. Han Li couldn't help but heave an internal sigh upon seeing this. The power that Taoist Hu Yan had displayed had come as quite a shock to him. He had already guessed that there was more to the sloppy old man than met the eye, but never had he anticipated that he would be capable of keeping close to 10 Immortal Palace Golden Immortals occupied on his own. Unfortunately, the Blaze Dragon Tao had already fallen apart internally. Otherwise, if all of the Tao lords had given Bailey Yan their unwavering support, then there was a very good chance that they would have been able to ward off the Immortal Palace attack. Luo Qinghai had clearly already identified this, and that was most likely why he hadn't gotten involved. Otherwise, if the Blaze Dragon Tao and the vast Flow Palace were to join forces, then Zhao Jinhen would have no choice but to immediately retreat. Right at this moment, Han Li noticed that the silver-robed young man had gone missing from the group of Immortal Palace cultivators that were surrounding Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. He quickly swept his gaze across the entire battlefield, but was unable to find the silver-robed young man, and a hint of foreboding welled up in his heart upon seeing this. High up in the sky, Bailey Yan's entire body was enveloped in crimson flames, giving him the appearance of a fiery deity. Outside of the crimson flames were a series of rainbow halos that were giving off astonishing heat, causing the surrounding space to warp and twist. Facing him from afar was Xiao Jinhin, who was holding a longsword that was riddled with ice spikes, and there was a translucent wheel of ice that was several dozen feet in size hovering behind him, giving off formidable glacial chi. Outside of that, there were also around a dozen more immortal palace cultivators, including Zhu Weiing, scattered around the area, but they were all keeping their distance from Xiao Jinhin, seemingly unable to bear the glacial aura emanating from his wheel of ice. Bailey Yan, why do you insist on resisting when your efforts are clearly futile? If you surrender now, perhaps the heavenly court would be willing to welcome you with open arms and give you an opportunity to redeem yourself, Xiao Jinhin said in a cold voice. Welcome me with open arms. What a joke. When has the heavenly court ever been willing to welcome anyone from the Reincarnation Palace? I'd be lucky not to be tormented for the rest of eternity. Let's cut the chit-chat and fight, Bailey Yan replied in a rumbling voice. As soon as his voice trailed off, he slashed his fiery longsword through the air, sending a vast wave of fire sweeping toward Xiao Jinhin. At the same time, bright crimson light appeared in his eyes as he began to chant an incantation. A deafening boom suddenly rang out from beneath the entire Bell Toll mountain range, immediately following which the entire landscape within a radius of thousands of kilometers around the white Jade peak began to tremble violently, causing countless beasts and birds to flee their homes in a panic. Another peculiar sound rang out, this one even louder than the one before, causing the entire space to shudder and tremble. All of the Blaze Dragon Dao cultivators at the scene immediately began looking around frantically, trying to figure out what was happening. Right at this moment, the earth down below suddenly bulged upward, and the massive cracks appeared on the ground, while rivers were severed and countless trees were felled. In the extremely far distance, around a dozen mountains were rising up at a rate that was discernible even to the naked eye, rising close to 1,000 feet in a matter of seconds, while countless giant rocks came rolling down the mountains, raising enormous clouds of dust. Lu Yue and the others immediately turned to Aoyang Qiushan upon seeing this, and Lu Yue asked, "What's going on here, Dao Lord Aoyang?" However, Aoyang Qiushan merely shook his head in silence, clearly also unsure of what he was witnessing. In contrast, a faint smile had appeared on Taoist Hu Yan's face. "We can't keep waiting. Set up the Purple Sun formation right away," Lu Yue immediately instructed upon seeing this. As soon as this instruction was issued, the 4 golden immortal cultivators around him immediately sprang into action, positioning themselves around Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai before each pulling out a purple talisman before tossing them forward onto the ground. The 4 talismans erupted into flames before falling onto the ground in unison, then transformed into 4 lines of fire that connected together to form a square. Immediately thereafter, the 4 of them began to chant an incantation in unison, and the fire on the ground instantly swelled drastically, forming 4 purple light barriers that erupted into the heavens to surround Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. There were no visible flames on the purple light barriers, but they were giving off extraordinary heat that was even hotter than the flames on Taoist Hu Yan's crimson Luan sword. At the same time, the 4 light barriers began to converge toward the center in unison. Taoist Hu Yan immediately grabbed onto Yun Nai's hand upon seeing this, and a burst of fire rose up around his body as he prepared to spring up into the heavens. However, Lu Yue and the others were already prepared for this, and a thick pillar of silver lightning came crashing down from above alongside a massive streak of golden sword light, forcing the 2 of them back into the Purple Sun formation. At this point, the formation had already constricted drastically, to the point that Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai were forced to press themselves tightly against one another, in order to avoid being scorched by the surrounding purple light barriers. Right at this moment, Taoist Hu Yan suddenly flipped a hand over to produce a translucent snow robe, which he draped over Yun Nai's body, then summoned a small jade bell, which he tossed directly upward. A massive green bell projection instantly appeared to encompass both of them, keeping the purple light barriers at bay. Meanwhile, the tremors and rumbling that were running through the earth were only growing more and more powerful, while balls of purple flames had ignited upon the green bell projection, which appeared as if it could shatter at any moment. "Hurry," Lu Yue urged, and the four golden immortals who had set up the formation immediately bit through the tips of their tongues before spitting out mouthfuls of blood essence onto the purple light barriers. The purple sun formation immediately began to glow far brighter than before while also accelerating in its compression, forcing the green bell projection to become smaller and smaller. Meanwhile, all of the other immortal palace cultivators were also attacking incessantly. Taoist Hu Yan was making a rapid series of hand seals as he injected his immortal spiritual power into the green bell without any reservation, but he was still unable to stop the purple light barriers from continuing to close in around them, and sweat was beginning to bead up on his forehead. Right as the green bell projection was about to collapse, a resounding boom suddenly rang out from beneath the ground. All of a sudden, a thunderous sound rang out from beneath the earth. This time, it no longer sounded like the toll of a bell. Instead, it was more like the violent and animalistic roar of some type of primordial beast. The entire earth shuddered violently as huge clouds of dust rose up all around the white jade peak, following which the entire mountain abruptly collapsed. Countless giant rocks came tumbling down amid a thunderous commotion, and it was like doomsday had arrived. Everyone who remained on the plaza were caught completely off guard, and they plunged down several hundred feet with the collapse of the mountain before hurriedly steadying themselves and rising up into the air. In contrast, instead of fleeing upward, Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai allowed themselves to plunge straight down to the foot of the white jade peak, using the tumbling rocks and cloud of dust as a smokescreen to cover their escape. "Don't let them get away," Lu Yue yelled in an urgent voice, then swooped straight down with his sword held in one hand. Bright golden light emerged over his body, forming a giant golden sword projection that was over 1,000 feet in length, plunging straight down toward what little remained of the white jade peak. The other immortal palace cultivators immediately followed along, while Ayang Qiushan hesitated momentarily before deciding to remain hovering in midair. Right at this moment, around a dozen of the mountains that neighbored the white jade peak collapsed one after another, plunging the entire area in a radius of several thousand kilometers into complete disarray. As soon as Lu Yue and the others rushed into the cloud of dust, they were immediately met with a wave of scorching heat, coupled with a terrifying aura that struck them with a sense of asphyxiation. "Something's not right here. Let's retreat for now," Lu Yue hurriedly yelled as he stopped cold in his tracks. Dong Jai and the others immediately stopped as well upon hearing this, then flew back to distance themselves from the already collapsed white jade peak. All of a sudden, a burst of red light appeared within the dust amid the sound of thunderous rumbling, and immediately thereafter, a pillar of molten lava that was over 1,000 feet in width erupted out of the ground like a crimson worm, rising up over 10,000 feet into the sky before raining down from the heavens. Luo Qinghai immediately swept a hand through the air upon seeing this, and the giant blue flower carried himself, and all of the vast Flow Palace cultivators accompanying him away to the north. High up in the sky thousands of kilometers to the west of the white jade peak, around a dozen deputy Tao lords were gathered together with grim looks on their faces. Earlier, they had followed Ayang Qiushan's instructions to evacuate some of the sect's low-grade disciples to safe areas, while also evacuating some of the other cultivators attending the preaching ceremony as well. This was far from a glamorous event for the sect, and they didn't want all of these outsiders to see what was happening before spreading the news to the outside world. After completing the task assigned to them, they decided to remain here instead of returning to the White Jade Peak in order to avoid unnecessary trouble. At this moment, all of them were scrutinizing what was once the White Jade Peak with tightly furrowed brows. Meanwhile, on the summit of the Origin View Peak, thousands of kilometers to the east of the White Jade Peak, Han Li and several dozen other true Immortal stage elders were gathered here, and all of them were also looking in the direction of the White Jade Peak. I wonder how Tao Lord Bailey is faring. An elder with a wide forehead and a head of white hair sighed with a concerned expression. Regardless of whether Tao Lord Bailey can weather this storm, the Blaze Dragon Tao will no longer be the same, another elder sighed. Another portly elder had a disgruntled look on his face as he grumbled. The northern glacial Immortal region has always declared itself to be a just and righteous sect, but how are they any different from a nest of bandits? We may as well. Before he had a chance to finish, another elder hurriedly interjected, "Be prudent with your words, Elder Zhu." The portly elder fell silent upon hearing this, then heaved a forlorn sigh. Han Li was planning to sneak away from here, but upon arriving on this mountain summit, he didn't immediately depart. Instead, he was standing on the edge of the plaza on the mountain summit while casting his gaze in the White Jade Peak's direction with blue light flashing in his eyes. The entire sky in that direction had taken on a bright red hue, and the storm of molten lava had set the nearby forests alight. The wind fanned the flames, causing them to spread rapidly, and plumes of dense, black smoke immediately began to rise up within a radius of several hundred kilometers. The entire sky was obscured beneath the columns of black smoke, while the ground below was quickly transforming into a sea of fire. Red and black seemed to have been the only colors left between heaven and earth, presenting a doomsday-like scene to behold. Right as everyone was looking on in bewilderment, a massive black shadow suddenly rose up from within the cloud and flames around the White Jade Peak. "What's that?" Qi Liang involuntarily exclaimed upon seeing this. Everyone else was also astonished by what they were seeing. Within the sea of fire, an incredibly enormous black bridge had emerged, spanning the length of several mountains, and there were scorching black flames burning all over its surface, presenting a very peculiar sight to behold. The blue light in Han Li's eyes brightened a little, following which his pupils contracted slightly. He could clearly see that the surface of the fiery black bridge was riddled with countless massive rhomboid scales that were no different from the ones seen on snakes and pythons. Before he had a chance to process what he was seeing, a resounding boom rang out, and the entire Origin View Peak shuddered violently as if it were also about to collapse. Many of the cultivators standing atop the mountain had already risen up into the air, anticipating the mountain's collapse, but thankfully, it was able to withstand the violent tremors. However, the already collapsed White Jade Peak exploded once again, sending countless huge rocks flying in all directions. Even more molten lava surged out of the ground from the epicenter of the explosion, forming dozens of winding rivers of lava that flowed over the landscape, charring all of the earth in their wake. Given the current situation, the Immortal Palace cultivators immediately abandoned their attack against Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai, flying far away while conjuring up protective light barriers to keep the falling rocks and lava at bay. It didn't take long before the entire area, within a radius of several dozen kilometers of the White Jade Peak, had been completely inundated by lava, forming a massive lake of lava with massive bubbles occasionally emerging and popping on its surface. Lu Yue swept his spiritual sense over the lava for a second, then yelled, "This lava is a little strange. Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai are hiding beneath it. Don't get close, let's stay here and try to force them out. I'll do it. Dongjai volunteered as he flipped a hand over to produce a shimmering black rock, which he tossed at the lake of lava down below. He then began to chant an incantation, and a burst of loud buzzing instantly rang out from the black rock, following which it rapidly swelled into a giant mountain that was over 10,000 feet tall, plummeting down toward the center of the lake. A resounding boom rang out as the bottom half of the mountain instantly plunged into the lake, sending vast volumes of molten lava erupting in all directions to sweep up enormous waves. However, the lake of lava then quickly settled back down, while the black mountain slowly sank into its depths bit by bit. Right at this moment, a thunderous roar rang out from within the lake of lava, causing its surface to ripple violently. In the next instant, the black mountain suddenly flew out of the lake of lava, having been launched into the sky before abruptly exploding. Immediately thereafter, an enormous black head that was even larger than the mountain emerged from the lake of lava.